What if Naruto was the son of Poseidon, like the actual Greek god of the seas? Okay, I know that sounds wild, but just think about it for a second. Poseidon doesn't just splash water around, this dude literally controls every drop of moisture on the planet. He can trigger tsunamis, cause earthquakes, summon hurricanes, and that's on a Tuesday. Now imagine that power flowing through Naruto's veins alongside Kurama's chakra. We're talking about a kid who could accidentally flood the entire land of fire just by having a bad day. So naturally, I had to explore what happens when our favorite knucklehead ninja discovers he's basically aquatic royalty. Ancient monsters hunting him down, family drama with literal gods, and oh yeah, he still has to pass his Chunin exams while learning not to accidentally sink entire countries. Hit that like button if you're ready for some divine chaos, and let's jump in. Naruto Uzumaki had failed the graduation exam twice. He wasn't about to fail it a third time, especially not because of some stupid water-walking exercise. The other kids made it look easy: step on, focus chakra to feet, walk across like the water was solid ground. Simple. So why was Iruka-sensei staring at him like he'd just sprouted a second head? Naruto, Iruka said slowly, you can stop now. Naruto looked down. He was standing in the middle of the academy's training pond about 20 feet from shore. The water around his feet wasn't just supporting him, it was perfectly still, like glass, while the rest of the pond rippled normally in the afternoon breeze. Oh, he took a step back toward shore. The water beneath his foot didn't even make a splash, it just held him. Is that bad? No, it's… Iruka glanced at the other instructors. It's very good, excellent chakra control. But Naruto caught the look that passed between the teachers. The same look adults always gave him, like he was something to be watched. He jogged back to the group of academy students, ignoring the whispers that followed. Sasuke was staring at him with those dark eyes, the way he always did when Naruto did something unexpected. Sakura was whispering to Ino, probably about how weird he was. All right, Iruka announced, that concludes today's practical exam. Results will be posted tomorrow morning. You're all dismissed. The other kids scattered toward the village, chattering about their plans for the evening. Naruto hung back, watching the water in the training pond. It was moving normally again, but something felt different. Like it was waiting for something. Hey Naruto, he turned to find Iruka approaching, that careful smile adults used when they wanted something. Want to grab some ramen, my treat? Naruto's stomach growled in response. He'd been too nervous to eat lunch, and now that the exam was over, he was starving. Really? Even if I failed? You didn't fail. Iruka's smile became more genuine. Trust me on that one. Ikaraku Ramen was busier than usual, filled with academy students celebrating the end of exams. Naruto slurped his miso ramen contentedly, the familiar flavors washing away his anxiety about tomorrow's results. So, Iruka said, picking at his own bowl, that was some impressive chakra control today. Was it weird? Naruto asked around a mouthful of noodles. The other kids looked at me funny. Different isn't the same as weird, Naruto. Sometimes different is exactly what the world needs. Before Naruto could ask what that meant, something caught his eye. In his broth, where steam should have been rising, a tiny figure was dancing on the surface of the soup. A woman no bigger than his thumb, with flowing green hair and what looked like scales along her arms. Naruto blinked hard. When he looked again, she was still there. The sea calls to its own, young prince, the tiny woman said, her voice like the sound of waves on rocks. Soon you will understand what flows in your veins. Ah, Naruto looked around. Iruka was still eating, completely oblivious. The other customers continued their conversations. No one else seemed to see the tiny woman doing backstrokes in his ramen. What? He started to whisper. Naruto, Iruka looked up. Everything okay? You look pale. When Naruto glanced back at his bowl, the woman was gone. Just soup and noodles and floating green onions that definitely weren't moving on their own. Definitely. Yeah, he said weakly. Just thought I saw something. Probably just tired. Big day tomorrow, assuming you pass. Naruto nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. The word prince echoed in his head. Him, a prince. That was the kind of thing that happened to people like Sasuke, not orphan pranksters who barely scraped through academy classes. He finished his ramen in silence, hyper-aware of every drop of liquid around him. His water glass seemed fuller than before. The tiny puddle under the sink looked deeper. Even the moisture in the air felt responsive somehow. Come on, Iruka said, standing and leaving money on the counter. I'll walk you home. They made it 3 blocks before Mizuki appeared. Iruka-sensei, there you are. Mizuki dropped from a nearby rooftop, landing with the practiced grace of a Chunin instructor. But something was off about his usual easy smile. His eyes were too bright, too focused. Mizuki, Iruka replied cautiously, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just need to borrow Naruto for a moment. Official business? Naruto felt Iruka tense beside him. What kind of official business? The kind that doesn't concern academy instructors. Mizuki's hand rested on the kunai pouch at his hip. Step aside, Iruka. No, the word hung in the air like a challenge. Naruto looked between his teachers, confused by the sudden tension. These were his instructors, the people who were supposed to protect him. Why did it feel like a fight was about to break out? I said step aside. Mizuki's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. The boy has questions about his heritage, don't you, Naruto? Questions about why he's different from the other children. Naruto's throat went dry. What do you mean? Don't listen to him, Naruto, Iruka said quickly. He's not, I mean, Mizuki interrupted, that you're not entirely human, are you? Oh, your mother was human enough, sweet little Kushina Uzumaki. But your father, Mizuki smiled, and it was all teeth. Your father was something else entirely. Mizuki, stop. There was a warning in Iruka's voice that Naruto had never heard before. Why? The boy deserves to know why water bends to his will, why sea creatures would die for him. Why the very ocean recognizes its. Iruka moved faster than Naruto had ever seen him move, kunai flashing toward Mizuki's throat. But Mizuki was ready, his own blade rising to intercept. The two weapons met with a sharp ring of metal on metal. Run, Naruto, Iruka shouted. Get to the Hokage Tower. But Naruto was frozen, watching his teachers try to kill each other in the middle of a village street. This wasn't how things were supposed to work. Adults were supposed to protect kids, not fight over them like. Mizuki broke the deadlock with a vicious kick that sent Iruka stumbling backward. Before the academy instructor could recover, Mizuki had a second kunai in his offhand, both blades spinning toward Naruto. Time slowed. Naruto saw the weapons arcing through the air. Saw Iruka's desperate lunge to intercept them. Saw that he wouldn't make it in time. And then the world exploded in water. The kunai hit something solid and bounced away, clattering harmlessly on the stone street. Where they should have struck Naruto, a wall of water hung in the air like a frozen wave, defying gravity and physics and everything Naruto thought he knew about how the world worked. Impossible, Mizuki breathed. The water wall collapsed with a tremendous splash, soaking all three of them and flooding the street. Naruto stood in the middle of it, completely dry, staring at his hands in shock. How did I? Because you're not just a Jinchuriki, Mizuki snarled, pulling out a scroll from his vest. You're an abomination, the child of a god and the container of a demon. The village elders were right to fear you. He bit his thumb and slammed his hand onto the scroll. A massive shuriken appeared in a puff of smoke, easily as tall as Naruto and sharp enough to cut through trees. But don't worry, Mizuki said, hefting the weapon. I'll put you out of everyone's misery. The giant shuriken spun through the air with a sound like screaming wind. Iruka threw himself forward again, but he was still too far away, still too slow. Naruto didn't think, he just reached out. The shuriken hit water again, but this time it wasn't a wall. It was a spinning vortex, a miniature whirlpool that caught the weapon and held it suspended, rotating slowly in midair like a toy in a bathtub. What? Mizuki started. Naruto flicked his wrist. The whirlpool reversed direction and expanded, becoming a rushing torrent that slammed into Mizuki like a battering ram. The Chunin instructor flew backward, crashing through a shop window in an explosion of glass and splintered wood. The street fell silent except for the sound of water trickling into the gutters. Naruto stared at his hands again. They looked normal, felt normal, but normal 12-year-old hands didn't command water like that, didn't create impossible defenses or turn weapons back on their wielders. Naruto, Iruka's voice was very quiet. We need to talk. Yeah, Naruto said weakly, watching Mizuki's unconscious form in the wreckage of the shop. I think we do. But as they walked toward the Hokage Tower, Naruto couldn't stop thinking about the tiny woman in his ramen. About the word prince and the way water seemed to listen when he needed it most. Maybe Mizuki had been lying about most things. Maybe he was just a traitor trying to hurt people. But maybe, Naruto thought as he unconsciously stepped over a puddle that somehow seemed to bow as he passed, maybe some of what Mizuki had said was true. Maybe he really wasn't entirely human after all. The Hokage's office felt smaller than usual, probably because it contained more tension than any room had a right to hold. The third Hokage sat behind his desk, smoking his pipe and studying Naruto with eyes that seemed older than time itself. Iruka stood near the window, occasionally glancing out at the village like he expected more traitors to come crawling out of the shadows. So, the Hokage said finally. Mizuki revealed classified information. He tried to kill Naruto, Iruka said sharply. I'd say that's slightly more pressing than information leaks. Indeed, the old man's gaze didn't leave Naruto's face. Tell me, my boy, what do you remember about tonight, specifically about how you defended yourself? Naruto fidgeted in his chair. I don't know, the water just came. Like it wanted to help. Water doesn't want anything, Naruto. It's not alive. Are you sure about that? The question slipped out before Naruto could stop it, and both adults stared at him. But now that he'd started, he couldn't seem to stop talking. Because it felt alive. It felt like it was listening to me, like it knew what I needed before I did. And the fish in the river last month, when I fell in during training, they kept swimming around me, almost like they were trying to tell me something. And sometimes when I'm near the lake, I swear I can hear. He trailed off, realizing how crazy he sounded. Hear what? The Hokage prompted gently. Voices, Naruto admitted, like people talking underwater. But that's impossible, right? People can't breathe underwater. Iruka and the Hokage exchanged a look that Naruto was getting very tired of seeing. The look that said they knew something he didn't, something important. Most people can't, the Hokage agreed carefully. But you're not most people, are you, Naruto? Mizuki said. He said I wasn't entirely human. That my father was something else. Naruto's voice got very small. Is that true? The silence stretched until Naruto thought he might scream just to fill it. Finally, the Hokage sighed. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was indeed human. One of the most remarkable humans I've ever known, but human nonetheless. Your father, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Your father's identity has been classified for your own protection. But yes, Naruto, you are more than human. The words hit like a physical blow. Naruto had suspected, had felt it in the way water responded to him in the dreams of impossible underwater cities that he'd been having for months. But hearing it confirmed was different, terrifying. What am I? He whispered. You're my student, Iruka said firmly. You're a ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village. You're someone who just saved his teacher's life using powers he doesn't understand. That's what you are. It was a kind answer, but it wasn't a complete one. Naruto could tell by the way the Hokage was still watching him, still measuring his reactions. There's more, isn't there? Naruto asked. Mizuki said I was the container of a demon. Is that part of it? Another silence, another exchange of looks. Yes, the Hokage said finally, but that's a conversation for another day. You've had enough revelations for one evening. But enough. The old man's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Tomorrow, you will receive your graduation results. If you pass, and you will pass, you'll be assigned to a genin team. Your training will continue, and in time, you'll learn to control whatever gifts you've inherited. But tonight, you go home, you rest, and you try not to flood any more streets. Naruto wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers about his father and the demon and the tiny woman in his soup. But exhaustion was catching up with him, the adrenaline of the fight finally wearing off. His entire body felt like he'd been swimming for hours. Okay, he said quietly, but you'll tell me eventually. About all of it, when you're ready, the Hokage promised. When you're strong enough to handle the truth. As Naruto walked home through the quiet village streets, he wondered if anyone was ever really strong enough to handle the truth about being something other than human. But then he thought about the way the water had responded to his need, the way it had protected him without being asked. Maybe he wasn't entirely human. Maybe that made him dangerous or strange or something to be feared. But tonight, it had also made him strong enough to protect the people he cared about. And maybe, Naruto thought as he climbed the stairs to his tiny apartment, that was enough to start with. The dreams that came that night were filled with the sound of waves and voices speaking in languages he somehow understood, calling him by names he'd never heard, but that felt like coming home. In the morning, he would be a genin. But tonight, for the first time in his life, Naruto Uzumaki dreamed of the sea and felt like he belonged somewhere. Naruto stared at his forehead protector for the third time that morning, running his thumb over the metal plate. The hidden leaf symbol caught the sunlight streaming through his apartment window, and for a moment he almost couldn't believe it was real. He was actually a ninja now, a genin. The graduation ceremony had been a blur of congratulations and nervous energy. Iruka-sensei had smiled when he handed over the headband, but there had been something else in his expression. Relief, maybe, or worry. Now Naruto was supposed to meet his new team at the academy for assignments. His stomach churned as he tied the forehead protector around his head. What if his teammates were people who already hated him? What if they'd heard about what happened with Mizuki? What if they could tell he wasn't entirely human just by looking at him? He splashed water on his face from the bathroom sink, trying to calm his nerves. The water felt warmer than it should have, almost like it was trying to comfort him, which was ridiculous. Water didn't have feelings, did it? The academy classroom buzzed with excitement and anxiety. New genin clustered in small groups, all wearing their forehead protectors with varying degrees of pride and terror. Naruto found an empty seat in the back and tried to look invisible, which was nearly impossible given his bright orange jacket. "All right, settle down," Iruka called from the front of the room. "I'm going to announce the three-man teams now. Team assignments have been carefully balanced based on your skills and abilities." Naruto only half listened as Iruka rattled off team compositions. He was too busy watching the other students, trying to guess who might end up stuck with him. Most of them looked excited about their futures. He felt like he was waiting for a particularly unpleasant medical procedure. "Team 7, Iruka announced, and Naruto's attention snapped back. Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto's heart did something complicated between a flip and a crash landing. Sakura, who thought he was an annoying loudmouth, and Sasuke, who definitely knew something was different about him after yesterday's water-walking demonstration. This was going to be a disaster. "Your Jonin instructor is Kakashi Hatake," Iruka continued. "He'll meet you in classroom 3 after lunch." Great, more waiting. Kakashi Hatake was 3 hours late. Naruto had used the time to wear a path in the classroom floor with his pacing, while Sakura alternated between complaining about their missing instructor and sighing over Sasuke. Sasuke himself sat perfectly still at his desk, but Naruto caught him staring occasionally, those dark eyes studying him like he was a puzzle that needed solving. When Kakashi finally appeared in the doorway, silver hair, mask covering half his face, and an air of casual indifference that made Naruto instantly suspicious, Naruto was ready to explode. "You're late," he shouted. "I'm sorry about that, got lost on the path of life." Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in what might have been a smile. "Anyway, meet me on the roof, we need to have a little chat." The academy roof offered a decent view of the village, but Naruto was too nervous to appreciate it. Kakashi sat on the edge, legs dangling casually over the drop, while the 3 genin arranged themselves on the ground nearby. "Right then," Kakashi said, "let's start with introductions. Tell me your names, what you like, what you dislike, your dreams for the future, that sort of thing. You first, Pinky." Sakura flushed at the nickname but launched into an introduction that mostly consisted of giggling about Sasuke and declaring her dislike of Naruto. Sasuke's introduction was predictably terse, liked training, disliked a lot of things, planned to restore his clan's honor and kill a certain someone. Then it was Naruto's turn. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he began, then paused. How much should he reveal? "I like ramen and training. I dislike people who judge others without knowing them, and my dream is to become Hokage someday so everyone will acknowledge me." It was mostly true, though he left out the part about hearing voices in water and having dreams about underwater cities. Some things weren't meant for first introductions. "Interesting," Kakashi mused, and Naruto got the uncomfortable feeling that the Jonin could see right through his omissions. "Well then, here's the thing. Just because you graduated from the academy doesn't mean you're really genin yet. Tomorrow morning, you'll face a survival exercise, the real test." "What kind of test?" Sakura asked. Kakashi's eye crinkled again. "The kind where only 2 of you will pass. The third goes back to the academy." The words hit like a cold wave. Naruto felt his stomach drop somewhere around his ankles. After everything, the graduation, the revelation about his heritage, the hope that maybe things were finally changing, he might get sent back to the academy like a failure. "Meet me at training ground 7 at 5 a.m., Kakashi continued, standing and stretching. "Oh, and don't eat breakfast, you'll just throw it up." He vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving 3 very worried genin on the academy roof. Training ground 7 turned out to be a pleasant clearing surrounded by trees, with a small stream running along one edge. Naruto arrived exactly on time, having been too anxious to sleep much. Sasuke and Sakura were already there, both looking as nervous as he felt. Kakashi, predictably, was nowhere to be seen. "He's late again," Sakura muttered. "Probably on purpose," Sasuke said. "Testing our patience or something." Naruto wasn't really listening. His attention had been caught by the stream. The water moved differently here, more aware somehow, like it was watching them. Which was impossible, but then again, a lot of impossible things had been happening lately. Morning, everyone. They spun around to find Kakashi standing behind them, somehow having appeared without any of them noticing. "You're late again," Naruto protested. "Yeah, well, a black cat crossed my path, so I had to take the long way." Kakashi held up two small bells. "Here's the exercise. You have until noon to take these bells from me. Only 2 bells, which means only 2 of you pass. The one who doesn't get a bell will be tied to that post over there and will watch the others eat lunch." Naruto's stomach growled at the mention of food. He'd followed Kakashi's advice about not eating breakfast, which now seemed like a terrible mistake. "Use any means necessary," Kakashi continued, "and don't hesitate to try to kill me. You won't succeed if you don't come at me with everything you've got." Sasuke and Sakura immediately scattered into the trees, but Naruto remained in the clearing, studying their instructor. Something about this felt wrong. Why give them an exercise where they were guaranteed to compete against each other instead of working together? "Not going to hide?" Kakashi asked, sounding mildly interested. "What's the point?" Naruto replied. "You obviously want us to fight each other instead of you, but that doesn't make sense for a team exercise." Kakashi's visible eyebrow rose slightly. "Oh, and what would you do instead?" Naruto glanced at the stream, then back at Kakashi. An idea was forming, probably a stupid one, but it was better than playing the Jonin's game. "I'd get my teammates and we'd come at you together," Naruto said. "But first, I'd do this." He reached out toward the stream, not entirely sure what he was doing but trusting the instinct that had saved him from Mizuki. The water responded immediately, rising from the streambed in a smooth column that bent and twisted through the air like a liquid snake. Kakashi went very still. The water struck where the Jonin had been standing, but hit only empty air. Kakashi had moved faster than Naruto could track, appearing in a crouch about 10 feet away. His casual demeanor had vanished, replaced by sharp attention. "That's not a standard academy technique," Kakashi observed. "I'm not exactly a standard student." Naruto kept his hand extended, feeling the water hovering nearby, ready to respond. "Sensei, what do you know about my parents?" "Enough," Kakashi's response was carefully neutral. "The question is, how much do you know?" Before Naruto could answer, Sasuke dropped from a tree branch above Kakashi. Kunai aimed at the Jonin's head. But Kakashi was ready, catching Sasuke's wrist and spinning him around into a textbook throw that should have sent the Uchiha flying across the clearing. Instead, Sasuke hit another column of water that had risen to catch him, cushioning his landing and setting him gently on his feet. "What the hell?" Sasuke stared at Naruto. "How are you doing that?" "I don't know," Naruto admitted. "But right now I don't care." Sakura, pink hair, emerged from behind a nearby tree. "What? Stop hiding and help us get the bells." "But if we work together, then maybe we all pass," Naruto interrupted. "Think about it, why would they put us on the same team just to make us fight each other?" Sakura looked uncertain, but after a moment she stepped into the clearing, kunai in hand. The 3 genin formed a loose triangle around Kakashi, who watched them with what looked like approval. "Much better," the Jonin said. "Now, let's see what you can actually do." What followed was less a fight than a very educational beating. Kakashi moved like water himself, flowing around their attacks and countering with moves that left all 3 genin dizzy and sore. But Naruto noticed something interesting. Whenever they coordinated their attacks, they came closer to actually touching him. And every time Naruto used the water from the stream, Kakashi's movements became slightly more cautious. "Time," Kakashi called finally. The sun was directly overhead, and all 3 genin were panting and exhausted. "And since none of you managed to get a bell," he trailed off, studying their faces. Naruto braced himself for the lecture about going back to the academy. "You pass." "What?" Sakura squeaked. Kakashi's eye crinkled again. "The bells were never the real test. The test was whether you could work together as a team. Most students spend the entire exercise trying to grab the bells individually. You figured out the real point and acted on it." Relief flooded through Naruto, so intense he nearly sat down right there in the grass. They'd passed. He was really going to be a ninja. "However," Kakashi continued, and Naruto's relief evaporated, "we need to have a conversation about that water technique, Naruto. Where did you learn it?" "I didn't learn it anywhere. It just happens." Kakashi was quiet for a long moment, studying Naruto with an intensity that made him want to squirm. "I see," the Jonin said finally. "Well then, Team 7 starts missions tomorrow morning." Meet at the same time, but this time I might actually be on time. As he walked away, Naruto heard him mutter something that sounded like, "This explains a lot." Sasuke waited until Kakashi was out of earshot before turning to Naruto. "All right, what aren't you telling us?" Naruto looked at his teammates, his actual teammates now, people who would be fighting alongside him and trusting him to have their backs. They deserved some version of the truth. "Remember how everyone always said I was different?" he began carefully. Turns out they were more right than anyone knew. He told them about the water responding to him, about the strange dreams, about the fight with Mizuki, and what the traitor had revealed. He left out the part about not being entirely human, that felt like too much too fast, but he gave them enough to understand that something unusual was going on. When he finished, Sasuke was frowning thoughtfully. "So you have some kind of bloodline limit? Maybe, I don't really know." "That's so cool," Sakura said, and Naruto nearly fell over in shock. "I mean, it's like having a secret power." "It's not exactly secret anymore," Naruto pointed out. "Well, it's still cool, and it helped us pass the test, so I'm not complaining." Sasuke was still frowning, but it was the thoughtful kind of frown rather than the annoyed kind. "If you can control water, you might be able to learn some advanced jutsu faster than normal students. That could be useful." It wasn't exactly a declaration of friendship, but coming from Sasuke, it was practically a warm hug. Naruto grinned, feeling something tight in his chest finally start to relax. Maybe this team thing was going to work out after all. As they walked back toward the village together, discussing possible training exercises and mission types, Naruto felt the stream beside the path ripple in what almost looked like approval. He was starting to think that maybe being different wasn't such a bad thing, especially if it meant he could protect the people who mattered to him. Even if he still had no idea what he really was, or what other surprises might be waiting in his future. Team 7's first month of missions was exactly as boring as every other Genin team's first month of missions. D-rank assignments: catching runaway cats, weeding gardens, painting fences, and cleaning up after the summer festival. The kind of work that made Naruto question whether being a ninja was really as exciting as he'd imagined. The only difference was that plants seemed to grow a little faster after he watered them, and the village's fountain had started producing cleaner water whenever he walked past. Small things that he tried to ignore, but that Kakashi definitely noticed. "All right, team," their sensei announced on a humid Tuesday morning, "we've got something different today. C-rank mission." Naruto perked up immediately. "Really? Like actual ninja work? Don't get too excited. We're escorting a bridge builder back to his home in the land of waves. Simple protection duty." Kakashi's visible eye crinkled. "Should be perfectly safe," Sasuke snorted. "Nothing's perfectly safe, otherwise they wouldn't need ninja." "Smart boy," Kakashi seemed pleased. "Meet our client." The door to the mission assignment room opened, and a grizzled old man stumbled in. He reeked of alcohol and squinted at them through bleary eyes. "These are the ninja protecting me, they're just kids." "Hey," Naruto bristled. "We're plenty capable. The loud one's right," the man said, though his tone suggested this wasn't necessarily a compliment. "Name's Tazuna. I'm a master bridge builder, and I need to get back to my country to finish the most important project of my life." Naruto caught something in the old man's voice when he mentioned the bridge. Pride maybe, but also fear, like he was trying very hard not to think about something dangerous. "When do we leave?" Sakura asked. 1 hour, Kakashi replied. "Pack for a week-long trip. And Naruto, bring extra water bottles." "Why would I need? Just do it." The journey to the land of waves took them along coastal roads where the air tasted of salt and the sound of waves was never far away. Naruto found himself energized in a way he'd never experienced before. His steps felt lighter, his senses sharper. Even his chakra seemed more responsive. "You're walking differently," Sasuke observed as they crested a hill that offered a view of the ocean. "Am I?" Naruto looked down at his feet. He hadn't noticed, but now that Sasuke mentioned it, he did feel more connected to the ground, like he could sense vibrations through the earth itself. "It's the water," Tazuna said unexpectedly. "Some people are just drawn to it. My grandson's the same way, can't keep him away from the shore." "Your grandson?" Sakura asked. Tazuna's expression softened slightly. "Inari, good kid, but he's been through a lot lately. Lost his father a few years back." Before anyone could ask for details, Kakashi held up a hand. "Stop!" The team froze. In the road ahead, a large puddle reflected the afternoon sky. It looked perfectly normal except for one problem. It hadn't rained in 3 days. "Interesting," Kakashi murmured. "Stay alert." They approached the puddle cautiously. As they drew closer, Naruto felt something like recognition stir in the back of his mind. The water wasn't quite right. It felt wrong somehow, contaminated. "Sensei," he said quietly, "something's not." The puddle exploded. Two figures emerged from what had seemed like ordinary water, ninja wearing breathing apparatus and wielding a chain with wicked-looking claws on either end. They moved with practiced coordination, the chains singing through the air toward Kakashi. "Demon brothers," Kakashi said, sounding almost bored. "How predictable." What happened next took about 3 seconds, but felt much longer. The chain wrapped around Kakashi, the claws found their mark, and their sensei was torn apart in a spray of blood and cloth. Sakura screamed. Sasuke cursed and reached for his kunai. Tazuna looked like he was about to faint, and Naruto felt something deep inside him wake up and take notice. The demon brothers turned toward the genin, their breathing apparatus giving them the appearance of monsters rather than men. "Three little lambs," one of them hissed. "This won't take long." They launched themselves forward, chains spinning between them like a web of death. Naruto didn't think, he just reacted. The water from their fake puddle rose at his command, forming a barrier between the attacking ninja and his teammates. But something was different this time. The water felt heavier, more solid. When the demon brothers' chain hit it, the water didn't splash or part. It held like a wall of liquid steel. "What the hell?" one of the brothers gasped. Naruto pushed forward with both hands, and the water wall became a water spear, shooting toward the nearest attacker. The man barely dodged, the pressurized stream carving a furrow in the road where his head had been. "Impossible," the second brother breathed. "Water doesn't behave that way without..." He never finished the sentence. Sasuke materialized behind him, kunai at his throat, while Sakura had somehow gotten close enough to the first brother to press a kunai against his spine. "Nobody move," Sasuke said calmly. The demon brothers froze, clearly outmatched despite their initial surprise attack. But Naruto barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the water he'd been controlling, which was now flowing back toward him like it was alive. When it reached his feet, it pooled around him in a perfect circle, reflecting his face like a mirror. In that reflection, just for a moment, he saw something else. Someone else. A man with sea-green eyes and hair the color of ocean storms, wearing robes that seemed to be made of flowing water itself. The image lasted less than a second, but the voice that came with it echoed in Naruto's mind like distant thunder. "Soon, my son, soon you will understand what you truly are." "Naruto," he blinked, and the water was just water again. Sakura was staring at him with wide eyes, while Sasuke kept his attention divided between the captured enemies and Naruto's impossible water manipulation. "I'm fine," Naruto said quickly, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Are they? Nicely done, all of you." They spun around to find Kakashi leaning against a tree, completely intact and looking pleased. Where his body had been torn apart, there was only a pile of cut logs. "Substitution jutsu," Sasuke realized. "You were never in danger." "Of course not. But I wanted to see how you'd react to a real threat." Kakashi's attention focused on Naruto. That was some impressive water manipulation, very advanced for someone with no formal training. "I don't know how I did it," Naruto admitted. "It just responded." "Aha." Kakashi didn't sound convinced, but he turned to interrogate the captured demon brothers instead of pressing the issue. It didn't take long to get the truth out of them. They were working for a shipping magnate named Gato who was trying to prevent Tazuna from completing his bridge. The old man had lied about the mission rank. This was definitely more dangerous than a simple escort job. "So what do we do?" Sakura asked. "This is way beyond our experience level." "We could go back," Kakashi said neutrally. "Report the mission parameters were falsified and let someone else handle it." Tazuna looked stricken. "Please, without that bridge, my people will never be free of Gato's control. My grandson, he's already lost hope. If I fail now..." Naruto found himself thinking about the old man's words about a kid who'd lost his father and was losing hope. About people trapped by someone else's greed and power. "We're not going back," he said firmly. "We're going to finish the mission." Sasuke nodded. "Agreed. I want to see what else we might face." "It could be dangerous," Kakashi warned. "Gato might send more ninja, possibly Chunin level or higher." "Then we'd better be ready," Naruto replied. As they resumed their journey toward the coast, Naruto couldn't shake the image of the man in the water's reflection. The voice had called him "my son," which was impossible. His father had been the fourth Hokage. Everyone knew that. Didn't they? Tazuna's house sat on the edge of a small fishing village, close enough to the water that Naruto could hear waves lapping against the docks outside his window. The old man's daughter, Tsunami, welcomed them warmly, but her son Inari barely looked up from his position by the window. The kid was maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and sadder eyes than any child should have. He spent most of his time staring out at the unfinished bridge that stretched partially across the bay, a monument to hope and futility in equal measure. He wasn't always like this, Tsunami explained quietly as she prepared dinner. Before his father died, Inari was the happiest child in the village, always laughing, always full of dreams. What happened? Sakura asked gently. Gato happened. Tsunami's voice went flat. Inari's stepfather stood up to him, tried to give people hope that things could change. Gato made an example of him, made sure everyone in the village watched. Naruto felt something cold settle in his stomach. He glanced over at Inari, who was still staring out the window like he could will his stepfather back to life through sheer determination. After dinner, Naruto found himself on the dock, listening to the waves and trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The water here felt different than it did back in Konoha. Older somehow, more aware. Can't sleep either. He turned to find Inari approaching, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Just thinking, Naruto replied. About the bridge and your stepfather and stuff. Inari sat down beside him on the dock. You don't understand. Nobody does. Heroes don't exist. People who try to change things just end up dead. That's not true, isn't it? Inari's voice was bitter for someone so young. My father tried to be a hero. Now he's gone and nothing changed. Gato's still in control, people are still suffering, and this stupid bridge will never be finished. Naruto wanted to argue, wanted to tell the kid that heroes did exist and that things could change. But the words felt hollow in his throat. What did he know about real suffering, about losing someone you love to the cruelty of others? Instead, he reached out to the water lapping at the dock's edge. It rose at his touch, forming shapes in the moonlight, a bird, a flower, a small figure of a man with arms outstretched. How are you doing that? Inari whispered. I don't know, Naruto admitted, but I think maybe some people are connected to things larger than themselves. Water or earth or fire. Maybe your stepfather was connected to hope and that's why people followed him. Hope didn't save him. No. But it inspired him to try. Naruto let the water figures dissolve back into the bay. And maybe that's what being a hero really means. Not saving everyone, but trying anyway. Even when you know you might fail. Inari was quiet for a long moment. Do you think the bridge will ever be finished? Naruto looked out at the incomplete structure, then back at the boy beside him. Yeah, I do. And I think your stepfather would be proud of how far it's come already. Something in Inari's expression shifted slightly. Not hope exactly, but maybe the faintest possibility that hope might exist somewhere. As they sat there in comfortable silence, Naruto became aware of something else in the water. A presence, vast and ancient and patient, watching from the depths. Not threatening, but evaluating. Like it was trying to decide whether he was worthy of something. The sensation lasted only a moment before fading, leaving Naruto with more questions than answers. But as he walked back to the house, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in a window and could have sworn, just for a second, that his eyes looked more green than blue. Tomorrow, Kakashi would take them to the bridge for guard duty. Tomorrow, they'd probably face more dangerous enemies than a couple of Chunin brothers. But tonight, Naruto fell asleep to the sound of waves and dreamed of underwater cities where voices called his name in languages he'd never learned but somehow understood. In his dreams, the man with sea-green eyes appeared again, no longer just a reflection. The time approaches, my son, the figure said, voice like the crash of waves against stone. Soon, you will need to choose between the world you know and the world you were born to inherit. Choose wisely, both realms depend on it. Naruto woke before dawn with salt on his lips and the absolute certainty that everything was about to change. Naruto woke to the sound of fighting. Steel rang against steel somewhere outside Tazuna's house, punctuated by shouts and the crash of something heavy hitting wood. He rolled out of his futon and grabbed his kunai pouch, muscle memory taking over before his brain fully caught up. What's happening? Sakura whispered from across the room. Don't know. Stay quiet, Sasuke was already at the window peering through the curtains. I count at least 6 attackers, professional movements. Kakashi appeared in the doorway like a ghost, fully dressed and alert. Mercenaries. Gato's making his move earlier than expected. We need to get to the bridge now. They moved quickly through the village streets, sticking to shadows and side routes, but Naruto could feel tension building in his chest with every step. The air tasted of salt and storm, and something deep inside him was stirring in response to the approaching conflict. The bridge loomed ahead through the morning mist, its incomplete span stretching halfway across the bay like a broken promise. On the finished section, two figures stood waiting. Even through the fog, Naruto could see that one of them was huge. Zabuza Momochi, Kakashi said grimly, the demon of the hidden mist. This just got a lot more complicated. The battle that followed was unlike anything from their academy training. Zabuza moved like a force of nature, his massive sword cleaving through the air with enough force to split trees. Beside him, a boy about their own age wore a hunter-nin mask and threw senbon with lethal precision. Kakashi matched Zabuza blow for blow, but Naruto could see the strain in their sensei's movements. This wasn't the casual superiority he'd shown against the demon brothers. This was a real fight against a real opponent. We need to help him, Naruto said, watching Kakashi barely dodge another swing of Zabuza's executioner's blade. Are you insane? Sakura hissed. We're genin, that's an S-rank missing nin. So we just watch our sensei die. Before anyone could answer, the masked boy appeared behind them in a swirl of mist. You should worry more about yourselves. Senbon flashed towards Sasuke's throat, but Naruto was already moving. Water rose from the bay below, forming a barrier that caught the needles and held them suspended like insects in amber. The masked boy Haku, Naruto somehow knew, though he couldn't say how, tilted his head with what might have been curiosity. Interesting, you manipulate water without hand signs. Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises. Naruto pushed forward with both hands, and the water barrier became a rushing wave that swept toward their attacker. But Haku was fast, impossibly fast. He formed hand signs almost too quick to follow, and the air around them suddenly filled with mirrors made of ice. Beautiful, deadly mirrors that reflected their faces back at them from every angle. Ice? Sasuke's eyes widened. But that's a bloodline limit, Haku finished, his voice echoing from every mirror at once. One you cannot counter. Senbon began flying from every direction, too many to dodge, too fast to block. Sasuke tried to deflect them with kunai, but there were simply too many angles of attack. Naruto felt something hot and angry unfurl in his chest. These people were trying to kill his teammates, his friends. The rage built like pressure behind a dam looking for release. Stop, he said, his voice carrying farther than it should have in the enclosed space of the ice mirrors. The senbon slowed. Not stopping exactly, but moving through air that had suddenly become thick as water. Naruto could see Haku's confusion even through the mask as his attack lost momentum, and the needles began falling harmlessly to the bridge deck. How Haku began, Naruto reached out to the bay far below them, to the vast body of water that surrounded the land of waves. He felt its weight, its power, its ancient patience. And for the first time since this all began, he didn't fight the connection. He embraced it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Water erupted from the bay in a towering column that dwarfed the bridge itself. But this wasn't the careful manipulation he'd managed before. This was raw power, oceanic force given form and direction by his will alone. The ice mirrors shattered like glass as the waterspout struck them, and Haku was swept away in the deluge. Naruto distantly heard Sakura screaming his name, but he was too focused on the feeling of absolute control to pay attention. Lightning began to fork down from the suddenly dark sky, drawn by the massive disturbance he'd created. Thunder rolled across the bay like the voice of an angry god. This was what he was meant to be. This was what he was meant to do. Naruto, Sasuke's shout cut through the storm noise. You're going to bring the whole bridge down. Reality crashed back like a cold wave. Naruto looked around and saw cracks spreading through the bridge's support structure as his waterspout continued to grow. If he didn't stop soon, the entire thing would collapse, taking Tazuna's dream and probably his team with it. He forced himself to let go, to release his grip on the vast power that wanted to keep flowing through him. The waterspout collapsed back into the bay, the lightning stopped, and the unnatural storm clouds began to dissipate. But the silence that followed felt dangerous in a completely different way. Everyone was staring at him. Sakura with wide, frightened eyes. Sasuke with something that looked like awe mixed with wariness. Even Kakashi and Zabuza had stopped fighting to watch the impossible display of power. Well, Zabuza said finally, his voice carrying clearly across the bridge. That's not something you see every day. Haku had somehow survived the waterspout and was pulling himself back onto the bridge, his mask cracked but still in place. What are you? He asked, and there was genuine wonder in his voice. I don't know, Naruto admitted, and realized it was the most honest thing he'd said in weeks. The rest of the battle felt almost anticlimactic after Naruto's display. Zabuza and Haku were skilled, certainly, but they were also practical. Facing an opponent who could apparently call down storms and manipulate the ocean itself was beyond their pay grade. They withdrew with professional efficiency, though not before Zabuza called out a warning about Gato's backup plan. Something about mercenary thugs and making examples of people who opposed him. As the mist cleared and Team 7 stood alone on the damaged but still functional bridge, Kakashi turned to face Naruto with an expression that was impossible to read. "All right," their sensei said calmly. "I think it's time you told me exactly what you are." Before Naruto could answer, a voice spoke in his head for the first time since the night he'd stolen the Forbidden Scroll. "Your blood carries more than just mine, Kit." Naruto stumbled, nearly falling as the Ninetales' voice echoed through his mind. It was deeper than he'd expected, older and tinged with what almost sounded like respect. "Did you just?" he whispered. "Yes, I spoke to you directly. Your little lights show there open some doors that have been locked for a very long time." The fox's mental voice carried dark amusement. "Tell me, boy, do you know what your father really was?" "My father was the fourth Hokage," Naruto said automatically, though he was beginning to doubt that simple truth. "One of your fathers was the fourth Hokage," Kurama corrected. "The other one. Well, let's just say he's significantly older and considerably more powerful than any mere ninja." "Naruto," Sakura's voice sounded very far away. "You're talking to yourself." He blinked and realized he was standing in the middle of the bridge while his teammates watched him with growing concern. Kakashi's visible eye was particularly sharp, like he was cataloging every detail of Naruto's behavior. "I'm fine," Naruto said quickly, "just thinking." "About what?" Sasuke demanded. "About how you just summoned a storm out of clear sky. About how you manipulated more water than exists in most rivers. About how you did all of that without any training or bloodline limit we know about." It was the most words Sasuke had strung together at once since Naruto had known him, and they were all accusatory. "I told you I don't know how." "That's not good enough anymore," Kakashi interrupted. "Naruto, what you just did isn't humanly possible. I need to know what we're dealing with here." The weight of their stares felt heavier than the ocean he'd just commanded. These were his teammates, his friends, the people he was supposed to trust with his life. But how could he explain something he didn't understand himself? "Tell them the truth," Kurama suggested with dark humor. "That should be entertaining." "The Ninetales is talking to me," Naruto said finally. "Right now, in my head." Kakashi went very still. "What is it saying? That I have two fathers, that the fourth Hokage was one of them, but there's someone else. Someone older and more powerful." "That's impossible," Sakura said weakly. "People can't have two fathers." "Oh, you sweet summer child," Kurama chuckled in Naruto's mind. "If only you knew how wrong you are." They finished the mission, because that's what ninja do. They protected Tazuna while he completed his bridge, and they helped drive off Gato's final assault when the shipping magnate arrived with an army of thugs and sellswords. Naruto was careful to keep his power use minimal and controlled, but he could feel the ocean calling to him every moment they remained near the coast. When they finally returned to Konoha, Kakashi immediately disappeared to file his mission report. Naruto suspected there would be several private conversations between their sensei and the village leadership before Team 7 was cleared for active duty again. He was walking home through the village streets, exhausted and confused, and still hearing Kurama's occasional commentary in the back of his mind, when something made him stop. The alley beside Yamanaka Flowers was too dark for the time of evening. Not naturally dark, supernaturally dark, like shadows had been pulled together and given weight. "Move," Kurama snarled in his mind, and for the first time the fox's voice carried genuine urgency. "Move now, Kit, that thing is dangerous." "What thing?" Naruto whispered, but he was already backing away from the alley mouth. That's when she appeared. The woman was beautiful in the way that predators were beautiful, sleek, dangerous, designed to lure prey into range. Her skin was pale as bone, her hair dark as midnight, and her smile showed teeth that were definitely not human. "There you are," she purred, stepping out of the shadows with fluid grace. "I've been following your scent for days, little prince. Do you know how rare your kind is in this part of the world?" "My kind?" Naruto's hand went instinctively to his kunai pouch. "Demigod," she said, and the word hit him like a physical blow. "Child of a mortal and one of the Olympians, your blood smells like storm and sea spray, very appetizing." Impausa, Kurama identified grimly, a Greek monster. "Vampire-like, they hunt demigods specifically." "I don't know what you're talking about," Naruto said, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. The woman, the monster, laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Oh, sweet boy. You really don't know, do you? That makes this almost too easy. She moved faster than human reflexes should have allowed, but Naruto was already dodging. Living with the Nine Tails had given him supernatural awareness, and Kurama's warning had put him on high alert. The Impouse's claws raked the air where his throat had been, leaving gouges in the brick wall behind him. "Stay still," she hissed. "This will hurt less if you don't struggle." Instead, Naruto reached for the nearest water source, a decorative fountain 2 streets away. The water responded instantly, streaming through the air in a pressurized jet that struck the Impouse's center mass with enough force to send her flying backward. But when she hit the wall, she didn't break like a human would. She absorbed the impact and rebounded, landing in a crouch with her inhuman smile wider than ever. "Oh yes," she breathed. "You're definitely one of his. I can taste the Sea Lord's power in your techniques." She lunged again, but this time Naruto was ready. He pulled water from every source he could sense, fountains, wells, pipes beneath the street, and compressed it into a lance of liquid pressure that could cut through steel. The Impausa tried to dodge, but she wasn't fast enough. The water lance punched through her chest with a wet, tearing sound, and she looked down at the hole in surprise. "Impossible," she gasped. "You're untrained. You shouldn't be able to." The words cut off as she dissolved into golden dust that scattered on the evening breeze, leaving only the smell of sulfur and the sea. Naruto stood alone in the alley, hands shaking, staring at the space where a monster had been trying to kill him 30 seconds earlier. "Well," Kurama said thoughtfully, "that was educational." "What the hell just happened?" "You killed your first mythological monster, Kit. Congratulations, there will be many more where that came from." "More what? What was that thing?" "I told you, an Impausa. A Greek monster that hunts children of the gods." Kurama's mental voice was unusually serious. "The fact that one found you here in the ninja world means your divine heritage is becoming impossible to hide. Your scent is getting stronger." Naruto sank down onto a nearby crate, legs suddenly unsteady. "Divine heritage, you keep saying that. What does it mean?" "It means, boy, that your real father isn't human. It means you're part of a world much older and more dangerous than the ninja villages. And it means that monster won't be the last one to come hunting for you." "Great," Naruto muttered. "Just great." On the bright side, Kurama added with dark amusement, "You're getting stronger. That water technique would have given a Chunin trouble." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "It should. Because if I'm right about who your divine parent is, you're going to need every bit of power you can get." As Naruto finally made his way home, he couldn't shake the Impausa's words. "One of his," she'd said. "The Sea Lord's power." Sea Lord, god of the ocean. In the stories Iruka had told them about ancient myths, there was only one deity who fit that description, but that was impossible. Those were just stories. Gods didn't exist, and they definitely didn't have children with ninja from hidden villages. "Did they? Sleep well, Kit," Kurama said as Naruto collapsed onto his bed. "Tomorrow, I suspect, is going to be very interesting." Outside his window, storm clouds were gathering despite the weather forecast calling for clear skies. In the distance, thunder rumbled like the laughter of something ancient and vast. Naruto fell asleep to the sound of rain that tasted of salt, and dreamed of palaces beneath the waves where a figure with his eyes waited with infinite patience for his son to come home. The Chunin exams had seemed like such a good idea a week ago. Naruto crouched behind a massive tree trunk in the forest of death, trying to ignore the way his teammates were staring at him. Again. It had been 3 days since the Impauser attack, and Sakura still jumped every time he made a sudden movement. Sasuke, meanwhile, had started watching him like he was a particularly dangerous explosive tag that might go off at any moment. "All right," Kakashi had said when they'd registered for the exams, "this will be good experience for you. Just remember, stay together, watch each other's backs, and try not to die." Simple advice. Unfortunately, staying alive was proving more complicated than expected, especially when monsters kept trying to eat him. "There's something following us," Sasuke whispered, kunai already in hand. "Has been for the past hour." Naruto nodded grimly. He'd felt it too, multiple somethings, actually, moving through the forest canopy with too much coordination to be natural predators. Whatever was hunting them was intelligent, patient, and getting closer. "How many scrolls do we still need?" Sakura asked, checking her gear for the dozenth time. "1 earth scroll," Sasuke replied. "But I'm more worried about what wants to turn us into lunch." "You should be," Kurama's voice rumbled in Naruto's mind. 3 Drakini and at least 2 more Impausai. "Your divine scent is like a dinner bell to these creatures." "Great," Naruto muttered under his breath. Any helpful advice? Don't die, the fox replied dryly, and try not to level the forest when you fight them. The village tends to notice that sort of thing. A branch cracked somewhere above them, too loud to be accidental. Naruto looked up and caught a glimpse of something that definitely wasn't human moving between the trees. Scaled skin, serpentine lower body, and claws that gleamed like metal. Move, he hissed to his teammates. Now! They scattered just as the first Dracena dropped from the canopy, landing where Sasuke had been crouching a second earlier. The creature was beautiful in the way that poisonous things were beautiful. Human from the waist up, with perfect features and long dark hair, but her lower body was pure serpent, easily 15 feet of scaled muscle that could crush bones. Little demigod, she hissed, forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. You smell like storms and deep water. Lord Oceanus will be so pleased when we bring him your head. Oceanus, Naruto had never heard the name, but something about it made his blood run cold. Ancient Titan, Kurama explained tersely. Older than the Olympians, and he's got a serious grudge against your father's family. 2 more Dracini slithered out of the undergrowth, followed by a pair of Impausi whose bronze legs gleamed in the filtered sunlight. 5 monsters all focused on him with predatory hunger. Sasuke Sakura, Naruto called out, not taking his eyes off the creatures surrounding them. Remember what Kakashi taught us about fighting multiple opponents? Stay mobile, control the battlefield, don't let them separate us, Sasuke recited, sharing an already spinning in his eyes. Good, because I don't think these things are interested in taking prisoners. The first Impausa moved with inhuman speed, claws extended toward Naruto's throat. He ducked under the swipe and reached for the moisture in the air, condensing it into a whip of pressurized water that wrapped around the creature's ankle and sent her crashing into a tree trunk. But the other 4 were already moving, and Team 7 was badly outnumbered. Sasuke's fire techniques proved surprisingly effective against the serpentine Dracini, their scales apparently more vulnerable to heat than expected. Sakura had gotten over her initial fear and was using her precise chakra control to enhance her strength, landing punches that cracked trees and sent monsters flying. Still, they were losing ground. The creatures were too fast, too coordinated, and worst of all, they seemed to be herding Team 7 deeper into the forest rather than trying to finish the fight quickly. They're driving us somewhere, Sasuke panted during a brief lull in the combat. This isn't a random attack. Naruto was about to agree when he felt something that made his blood freeze. A presence in the forest, vast and ancient and angry, moving toward them with inexorable purpose. Whatever was coming made the monsters they were currently fighting feel like house pets. Oh no, Kurama whispered in his mind. Kit, you need to run. Now, what's? The trees ahead of them exploded outward as something enormous burst through the undergrowth. Naruto caught a glimpse of multiple serpentine heads, each the size of a horse, attached to a body that seemed to go on forever. Scales that looked like they were made of bronze, eyes that burned with primordial hatred, and a roar that shook leaves from every tree in a 100-yard radius. Hydra, Sakura whispered, and Naruto could hear the terror in her voice. The monster that had killed Hercules in the old stories was bearing down on them with murder in its many eyes, and Naruto suddenly understood why the other creatures had been hurting them. They weren't the real threat, they were just there to make sure he didn't escape before the main event arrived. One of the Hydra's heads snapped forward, jaws wide enough to swallow a person whole. Sasuke threw himself sideways, barely avoiding the crushing bite, but the creature's other heads were already moving to cut off escape routes. This wasn't a fight they could win through conventional means. The thing was too big, too fast, and according to legend, cutting off its heads would just make more grow back. But legends, Naruto was beginning to realize, didn't account for the power of an angry demigod who was tired of being hunted. He reached out to every source of water within a mile radius. The forest was full of hidden streams, underground springs, and moisture trapped in plants and soil. All of it responded to his call, rising from the earth in dozens of spiraling columns that converged above the Hydra like a liquid tornado. "What are you doing?" Sakura shouted over the roar of moving water. "Something stupid," Naruto replied, pouring more power into the technique than he'd ever attempted before. "Get clear!" The water tornado descended onto the Hydra like the wrath of the ocean itself. But instead of trying to crush the creature, Naruto did something different. He made it dense, thick, heavy as quicksand but fluid as mercury. The Hydra's heads thrashed wildly as they were engulfed, but the more they struggled, the more the supernatural water seemed to cling to them. Naruto could feel the creature's panic as it realized what was happening. Its heads were being forced underwater, held there by liquid that wouldn't let them surface no matter how they fought. Drowning? He was drowning a monster that probably hadn't needed to breathe in 1,000 years. The technique took everything he had. Power flowed out of him like blood from an open wound, and distantly he could feel Kurama adding his own chakra to keep the attack going. But it was working. The Hydra's struggles were getting weaker, its movements more desperate. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the creature went still. Naruto released the water technique and collapsed to his knees, completely drained. The Hydra lay motionless in the mud, its many heads finally silent. Around them, the other monsters had fled when they saw their apex predator defeated. "Is it dead?" Sakura asked hesitantly. "I think so." Naruto struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "But let's not stick around to find out." That's when the applause started. They spun around to find a pale man in dark robes standing at the edge of the clearing, clapping slowly. His eyes were yellow like a snake's, and when he smiled, his canine teeth were noticeably longer than they should have been. "Impressive," Orochimaru said, his voice carrying that distinctive hiss that made Naruto's skin crawl. "Very impressive indeed. I don't think I've ever seen someone drown a Hydra before." "Orochimaru," Sasuke breathed, and there was something hungry in his voice that Naruto didn't like. "Hello, Sasuke-kun, still obsessed with power, I see." The Sannin's yellow gaze fixed on Naruto. "But you're the interesting one. Tell me, child, do you know what you really are?" "I'm getting really tired of people asking me that question," Naruto said, though he was too exhausted to put much heat behind it. "I imagine you are, but the answer is quite fascinating." Orochimaru took a step closer, moving with that fluid grace that reminded Naruto uncomfortably of the Drakini. "You're a demigod, boy. The child of Poseidon, lord of the seas. I've been tracking you for weeks." The words hit like physical blows. Poseidon, the name from the old stories, the god of oceans and earthquakes and horses. Naruto's mind reeled, trying to process the implications. "That's impossible," he said weakly. "Is it? You command water like it's part of your body. You can speak to sea creatures. Your power grows stronger near large bodies of water. The monsters hunt you because they can smell divine blood." Orochimaru's smile widened. "Face the truth, boy. You're not human." "He's right," Kurama said quietly in Naruto's mind. "I've known since the night you were born. Your mother. She met Poseidon during a diplomatic mission to the land of water. The god was intrigued by her spirit, her strength. What happened between them?" "No," Naruto whispered, but the denial felt hollow. "Oh yes," Orochimaru purred, "and that makes you incredibly valuable. The power of a god combined with the Nine Tails chakra trained in the ninja arts, you could reshape this world." "I don't want to reshape anything. What you want is irrelevant. What matters is what you can do." The Sannin's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Join me, boy. Let me teach you to use your true heritage. Together we could." Sasuke moved faster than Naruto had ever seen him move, appearing behind Orochimaru with a crackling ball of lightning in his palm. "Stay away from my teammate." But Orochimaru was faster. He spun around and caught Sasuke's wrist, stopping the Chidori inches from his heart. With his free hand, he pressed something against Sasuke's neck, some kind of mark that flared with dark energy. "A gift," Orochimaru whispered as Sasuke screamed and collapsed, "for trying to protect something precious." Rage exploded through Naruto like a dam bursting. This thing had hurt Sasuke, had marked him with some kind of curse. Had been hunting Naruto for weeks like he was an animal to be captured. The forest's water table responded to his fury, geysers erupting from the ground in a dozen places. But Orochimaru was already gone, vanishing in a swirl of mud and shadows with that horrible laughter echoing behind him. Naruto dropped to his knees beside Sasuke, who was writhing on the ground with what looked like flame-shaped marks spreading across his neck and shoulder. "What did he do?" Sakura whispered, hands hovering over Sasuke but afraid to touch the cursed marks. "I don't know." Naruto placed his palm against Sasuke's forehead, and to his surprise, his touch seemed to ease some of the pain. The dark marks receded slightly, though they didn't disappear entirely. "But we need to get him help. The curse mark will change him," Kurama warned. "Give him power, but at a terrible price. You may have just saved your teammate's life, but his path is about to become much darker." Naruto looked down at Sasuke's pain-twisted face, then up at the clearing where he defeated a legendary monster through sheer determination and divine heritage he'd never known he possessed. Everything was changing. His identity, his power, his understanding of the world and his place in it. And somehow he doubted this was the end of it. As he helped Sakura carry their unconscious teammate toward the tower at the forest center, Naruto couldn't shake Orochimaru's words. The child of Poseidon, a demigod. If it was true, then everything he thought he knew about himself was wrong. And if monsters and missing Nin were already hunting him for what he was, how much worse would it get when word spread that the son of a sea god was living in the Hidden Leaf Village? Much worse, Kurama answered his unspoken thought, but also much more interesting. Your father's blood is awakening, Kit. Soon, you'll have to choose between the world you know and the world you were born to inherit. Great, Naruto muttered, adjusting his grip on Sasuke's unconscious form. No pressure or anything. Above them, storm clouds were gathering despite the clear weather forecast, and in the distance, thunder rumbled like the laughter of ancient gods. The Chunin exams were turning out to be far more educational than anyone had expected. Team 7 made it to the central tower with 2 hours to spare before the deadline, though made it was probably generous. Sasuke had been unconscious for most of the journey, the curse mark on his neck pulsing with dark energy that made Naruto's teeth ache. Sakura looked like she hadn't slept in days, which was probably accurate. And Naruto felt like he'd been hit by a particularly vindictive tsunami. The medical ninja took one look at Sasuke's condition and immediately called for backup. Within minutes, their teammate was surrounded by specialists, all muttering about unprecedented curse seal construction and foreign chakra integration. He'll live, the head medic told them finally, but he'll need extensive treatment. The mark is unusual. That seemed to be everyone's favorite word for describing Team 7 lately. Can we see him? Sakura asked, worry evident in every line of her body. Not yet. We need to stabilize the seal before it spreads further. The medic paused, studying Naruto with sharp eyes. Actually, you might be able to help. Your chakra seemed to have a calming effect on the curse when you touched him in the forest. My chakra? It's unusually pure. Clean, almost like. The medic trailed off, frowning. Well, it doesn't matter. The point is, brief contact might help ease his pain while we work. Naruto followed the medical team into a sterile white room where Sasuke lay unconscious on a narrow bed, dark marks spreading like living tattoos across his pale skin. When Naruto placed his hand on Sasuke's forehead, the curse marks immediately receded, their angry red glow fading to a dull purple. Fascinating, one of the medics murmured. It's like your chakra is naturally purifying the dark energy. Because it is, Kurama explained privately. Divine blood has that effect on curses and dark magic, one of the few advantages of your mixed heritage. How long do I need to stay here? Naruto asked. As long as it takes, your friend's condition is serious. So Naruto sat beside Sasuke's bed for the next 18 hours, one hand maintaining contact with his teammate while medical ninja worked around them. It gave him plenty of time to think about everything that had happened in the Forest of Death. The monsters had called him a demigod. Orochimaru had named Poseidon as his father. Even Kurama seemed to believe it was true. But gods weren't real, were they? They were just stories from the old world, myths to explain things people didn't understand. Except the monsters hunting him were real. The power flowing through his veins was real. And somewhere deep in his gut, below all the fear and confusion, was a growing certainty that his entire understanding of the world was about to change. Kakashi arrived while Sasuke was still unconscious, looking more serious than Naruto had ever seen him. Their sensei took one look at the curse marks, spoke quietly with the medical team, then settled into a chair across from Naruto's position by the bed. So, Kakashi said conversationally, "Want to tell me how you killed a Hydra?" Naruto winced. He'd been hoping the monster's death wouldn't be common knowledge, but of course the village's intelligence network would have investigated the massive chakra disturbance in the Forest of Death. It was trying to eat us, he said defensively. I just responded, by drowning a creature that doesn't need to breathe, using a water technique that required more chakra than most Jonin possess. Kakashi's visible eye was impossibly sharp. And according to the AA Chenbu team that investigated the site, you did it without using a single hand sign. Is that bad? It's impossible. Unless, Kakashi leaned back in his chair, studying Naruto like a puzzle he was slowly solving. Unless you're not entirely human, the words hung in the air between them like an accusation. Naruto felt his mouth go dry. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Kakashi reached into his vest and pulled out a thick file folder. I've been doing some research since our mission to the Land of Waves. Interesting reading. He opened the folder and began pulling out papers, old mission reports, historical documents, even what looked like sketches from ancient texts. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was sent on a diplomatic mission to the Land of Water 12 months before you were born. Kakashi began, his voice taking on the tone of someone presenting evidence. The mission was classified at the highest levels, and the details were sealed by order of the third Hokage. Naruto's chest tightened. So I pulled some strings and got access to the files. Kakashi held up a report with official seals covering half the page. According to this, Kushina encountered what she described as a man who commanded the very ocean itself during a storm that nearly destroyed her diplomatic vessel. The room felt like it was getting smaller. That doesn't mean the storm stopped the moment this man appeared. The sea calmed instantly. And according to Kushina's report, he had eyes like deep water and a presence that felt older than the ninja villages themselves. Kakashi set down the report and picked up another document. 3 days later, she reported feeling unwell. By the time she returned to Konoha, she was pregnant. "My father was the fourth Hokage," Naruto said weakly. "Minato accepted you as his son, yes. Loved you as his own child. But biologically," Kakashi pulled out a sketch that looked like it had been copied from an ancient scroll. It showed a man with a beard and trident standing knee-deep in ocean waves. "Tell me, Naruto, does this look familiar?" The face in the sketch was older, more regal than the figure Naruto had seen in his water reflections and dreams. But the eyes were identical. The same sea-green color, the same sense of vast depth and power. "Poseidon," Kakashi said quietly, "lord of the seas in ancient Greek mythology, and if I'm right, your biological father." Naruto stared at the sketch until the lines began to blur. Part of him wanted to deny it, to insist that gods were just stories, and he was nothing more than a normal ninja with some unusual techniques. But the evidence was overwhelming, and deep down, he'd known the truth for days. "Does the village know?" he asked finally. "The Hokage knows. He's known since the night you were born." Kakashi closed the file folder. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Naruto could answer, Sasuke stirred on the bed, dark eyes fluttering open. The curse marks had faded to barely visible lines while Naruto had been maintaining contact, but they were still there, still pulsing with alien energy. "What happened?" Sasuke's voice was rough from hours of unconsciousness. "You got cursed by a snake," Naruto said, trying for lightness. "But you're going to be fine." Sasuke's gaze sharpened as he took in the medical equipment, Kakashi's presence, and the folder of documents. "How long was I out?" "About a day. The preliminary matches for the finals start in an hour." "Finals?" Sasuke tried to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his cursed shoulder. "We made it through the second exam." "Barely." Naruto helped support him as he struggled upright. "You sure you're up for fighting?" "I have to be." There was something hungry in Sasuke's expression, and Naruto didn't like the way his teammates' chakra felt different now. "Darker, I need to prove that I'm strong enough." "Strong enough for what?" But Sasuke didn't answer, his attention already focused on the upcoming matches. And Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that his friend's priorities had shifted in a dangerous direction. The preliminary arena was packed with spectators, genin competitors, and enough jonin to stop a small war. Naruto found himself standing with the other successful teams, trying not to think about the file folder Kakashi had shown him or the way every source of water in the building seemed to be humming with responsive energy. "The matches will be randomly determined," the proctor announced, gesturing to a large display board. "First match, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Neji Hyuga," of course, because his day hadn't been complicated enough already. Neji stood across the arena floor like a statue carved from arrogance, his pale eyes active and dismissive. So the dead last finally gets his chance to embarrass himself publicly. "Yeah, well, we'll see about that." Naruto settled into a fighting stance, hyper-aware of the underground water pipes running beneath the arena floor. "The winner advances to the finals," the proctor continued. "The loser goes home. Begin." Neji moved immediately, his gentle fist technique striking toward the chakra points in Naruto's arms and chest. But Naruto was already flowing backward, moving like water himself as he avoided the precise strikes. "You can't run forever," Neji called out, continuing his relentless assault. "Your fate is sealed. Failures will always be failures." "Is that what you think?" Naruto caught Neji's next strike on his forearm, feeling the Hyuga's chakra trying to disrupt his own energy flow. But instead of being sealed off, his chakra felt like it was getting stronger. "Because I think you're about to learn something about destiny." He reached out to the water pipes beneath the arena, feeling the liquid responding to his call. But this time, instead of bringing the water to the surface, he did something different. He enhanced it, made it dense and responsive, and filled with the kind of power he'd felt during his dreams of underwater palaces. The arena floor began to vibrate. Gently at first, then with increasing intensity as Naruto drew more and more water from deeper and deeper sources. He wasn't just accessing the building's plumbing anymore. He was reaching down to the water table itself, to underground rivers and aquifers that most people never even knew existed. "What are you doing?" Neji demanded, his Byakugan showing him the massive chakra buildup but not its source. "Something I probably shouldn't," Naruto admitted, then pushed his power outward. Water erupted from every drain, every pipe, every source within a quarter-mile radius. But it didn't flood the arena. Instead, it flowed around Naruto like a living thing, forming spirals and currents that defied gravity and physics in equal measure. The crowd fell silent, staring at the impossible display. Even the Jonin were watching with expressions that ranged from amazement to concern. "This is impossible," Neji breathed. "No one can manipulate that much water without..." "Without what?" Naruto asked, stepping forward. The water moved with him, flowing around his feet and swirling up his arms like liquid armor. "Without being something more than human," he gestured, and the water responded, forming a dozen tendrils that struck toward Neji from every angle. The Hyuga tried to counter with his rotation technique, but the water simply flowed around the spinning defense and struck him from behind, sending him skidding across the arena floor. "You want to talk about fate, Neji?" Naruto continued advancing, the water around him growing brighter and more substantial with each step. "Let me tell you about fate. Some people are born to be ordinary. Some are born to be ninja. And some..." He raised his hand, and every drop of water in the arena rose with it, forming a towering column that reached nearly to the ceiling. "Some are born to command the very elements themselves." The water column collapsed into a rushing wave that swept across the arena floor, carrying Neji along like driftwood. When it receded, the Hyuga lay unconscious against the far wall, his pale robes soaked and his expression slack with shock. "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki," the proctor announced, though his voice carried clear amazement. The arena erupted in stunned conversation as Naruto walked back toward the competitor section, leaving pools of water in his wake. He caught glimpses of faces in the crowd, some amazed, some frightened, some calculating what this new information might mean. In the cage viewing box, he could see the third Hokage speaking urgently with his advisors. Their conversation looked heated, and Naruto suspected he was going to be answering a lot of questions very soon. "Well done, Kit," Kurama said approvingly, "though you might want to dial back the divine power displays before someone decides you're too dangerous to live." "Too late for that," Naruto muttered, watching the medical team carry Neji out of the arena. "I think the secret's out." "Good," the fox replied. "Secrets are overrated anyway. Besides, you'll need that power for what's coming." "What's coming?" But Kurama didn't answer, and Naruto was left standing in a puddle of his own making, wondering what he'd just unleashed on himself and the village he'd sworn to protect. Above them, storm clouds were gathering over Konoha for the third time in a week, and thunder rumbled like the approving laughter of ancient gods. The finals were still a month away, but Naruto had the sinking feeling that his biggest challenges were just beginning. The Hokage's office had never felt so small. Naruto sat in the chair across from the third Hokage's desk, hyper-aware of the way every glass of water in the room seemed to be vibrating slightly. Two Chenbu operatives flanked the door, their animal masks unreadable but their postures suggesting they were ready for trouble. Kakashi stood by the window, occasionally glancing out at the village streets where people were still talking about the preliminary match 3 hours later. "So," the Hokage said finally, setting aside the mission report he'd been reading, "it seems we need to have a conversation about your heritage." Naruto shifted in his chair, causing the water in the old man's teacup to ripple. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that. In front of everyone, I mean. But it did happen, and now half the village is talking about the Uzumaki boy who commands oceans." The third Hokage's weathered face was impossible to read. "Tell me, Naruto, what do you know about your true parentage?" "Kakashi-sensei showed me some files about my mother's mission to the land of water and..." Naruto's voice trailed off. Even now, saying it out loud felt impossible. "And about Poseidon?" "Yes, I was there the night you were born, you know. I saw the storm that came with your first breath, the way the very air tasted of salt and sea spray." The Hokage leaned back in his chair. "I also saw how Minato and Kushina loved you, regardless of your divine blood. You were their son in every way that mattered. But not in the way that's going to keep me alive now that everyone knows what I am." The old man nodded grimly. "There are those who will see your power as a threat to the established order, others who will want to use you as a weapon, and still others who will simply fear what they don't understand. As if summoned by his words, the door opened without a knock. Danzo Shimura entered the office like a shadow-given form, his visible eye fixed on Naruto with calculating intensity. "Hiruzen," Danzo said without preamble, "we need to discuss the boy." "Naruto has a name," the Hokage replied coolly. "And he's sitting right here." "The boy," Danzo continued as if the third hadn't spoken, "represents both an unprecedented opportunity and an existential threat. His display today proves he possesses power beyond anything we've seen from a genin. Beyond most jonin, for that matter. Your point? My point is that such power requires careful management. The Root program could provide the necessary training and guidance." Naruto felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Every story he'd heard about Root involved words like emotionless, obedient, and disposable. The idea of Danzo getting his hands on divine power was terrifying. "Absolutely not," Kakashi said from his position by the window, his voice carrying an edge Naruto had never heard before. "You're not part of this discussion, Kakashi. I am now." Their sensei turned away from the window, and Naruto caught a glimpse of something dangerous in his visible eye. "Naruto is my student, my responsibility, and he's not going anywhere near your program." Danzo's expression didn't change, but Naruto felt something cold brush against his consciousness, a probing touch that felt like mental fingers trying to dig into his thoughts. "Oh, I don't think so," Kurama snarled, and suddenly Naruto's mind was protected by a barrier of foxfire and divine power that sent Danzo's probe rebounding like it had hit a wall of solid steel. The older man actually stumbled, his visible eye widening in surprise. "Interesting," Danzo murmured, steadying himself against the doorframe. "The boy has unexpected defenses." "The boy," Naruto said, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor, "is getting really tired of people talking about him like he's not here." Water began rising from every source in the office, the Hokage's teacup, a flower vase on the windowsill, even moisture condensing out of the air itself. But instead of the wild, uncontrolled display from the arena, this felt focused, dangerous. "You want to know what I am?" Naruto continued, his voice carrying undertones that sounded like distant thunder. "I'm the son of Poseidon, lord of the seas. I'm a Jinchuriki containing one of the most powerful beings in existence. And I'm a ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village who's sworn to protect the people I care about." The water in the room began to glow with a soft blue light, responding to emotions Naruto didn't entirely understand. "What I'm not," he said, fixing Danzo with a stare that made the man take an involuntary step backward, "is a weapon for you to point at your enemies." "Naruto," the third Hokage said gently, "perhaps you should." "No." Naruto's attention shifted to the old man, and his expression softened slightly though the water continued to swirl around him. "Hokage-sama, I respect you. I'll follow your orders and serve the village however you ask. But I won't be turned into something I'm not, and I won't let anyone use my power to hurt innocent people." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sound of water drops hitting the floor. Finally, Danzo spoke. "The boy is more dangerous than we thought. Uncontrolled power combined with misguided idealism. It's a recipe for disaster. Or," the Hokage said thoughtfully, "it's exactly what we need." Before anyone could ask what he meant, an Chenbu operative appeared in the window, landing on the sill with practiced silence. "Hokage-sama," the masked figure reported, "urgent message from our contacts in the land of water. There's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" "Multiple sea monster attacks along the coast. Ships destroyed, entire fishing villages evacuated. The Mizukage is requesting immediate assistance from any ninja with water-based abilities." The Chenbu's mask turned toward Naruto. "Specifically, they're asking for the ninja who commands the seas themselves." Naruto felt his blood run cold. "They know about me already. Word travels fast when you create tidal waves in front of hundreds of witnesses," Kakashi observed dryly. The third Hokage stood, moving to a large map of the ninja world mounted on the wall behind his desk. "How long ago did these attacks begin?" 3 days ago, Hokage-sama. "The same day as the Chunin exam preliminaries." 3 days ago, right after Naruto's public display of power. "That couldn't be a coincidence." "It's not," Kurama confirmed grimly. "Your divine heritage is like a beacon to certain entities. They know where you are now, Kit, and they're not happy about it." "What kind of entities?" Naruto asked aloud, not caring how it looked to the others in the room. "Old ones. Older than the ninja villages, older than most of the current gods. Your father has enemies, boy, ancient ones who have been waiting a very long time for an opportunity like this." Naruto, the Hokage asked. Are you all right? The Nine Tails says the attacks are connected to me, to my other heritage. Naruto looked at the map, tracing the coastal areas of the land of water with his eyes. Something old and angry is using the sea monsters to draw me out. All the more reason to keep him here, Danzo interjected. Protected, controlled. All the more reason to let him face this threat before it gets worse, the Hokage countered. If these entities want Naruto specifically, they won't stop at the land of water. They'll keep escalating until they get what they want. You're talking about sending a 12-year-old boy to fight sea monsters. I'm talking about sending the son of Poseidon to protect innocent people from creatures that only he can stop. The old man's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Naruto, the choice is yours. You can stay here, safe in the village while people die, or you can go to the land of water and face whatever's waiting for you. Naruto thought about the fishing villages he'd seen during their escort mission with Tazuna. About families like Inaris trying to make honest livings from the sea. About monsters rising from the depths to destroy everything in their path just to get to him. I'll go, he said without hesitation. But I want my team with me. Sasuke is still recovering from the curse mark, Kakashi pointed out. Then just Sakura and you, we're Team 7, we stick together. The Hokage nodded approvingly. Very well. You'll leave at first light. Kakashi, I'm upgrading this to an A-rank mission with special parameters. Your primary objective is to eliminate the threat to civilian populations. Secondary objective is to keep Naruto alive. What about my objective? Naruto asked. Your objective, the old man said seriously, is to learn what it truly means to be the son of a god. Because I suspect that before this mission is over, you're going to need every bit of divine power you can muster. As they left the Hokage's office, Naruto caught Danzo's parting words to the third. You're making a mistake, Hiruzen. Power like that boy possesses. It changes people, and not always for the better. Maybe Danzo was right. Maybe the power flowing through Naruto's veins would change him in ways he couldn't predict or control. But as he looked out at the village he'd sworn to protect, at the people living their lives in blissful ignorance of the ancient forces stirring in the depths, Naruto knew he didn't have a choice. He was the son of Poseidon, the child of two worlds, and if something from the deep wanted to use innocent people as bait to draw him out, then it was about to learn why you didn't threaten a demigod's family. Ready for war, Kit? Kurama asked as they walked through the village streets toward Naruto's apartment. No, Naruto replied honestly, but I don't think that matters anymore. Above them, storm clouds were gathering again, and the first drops of rain tasted unmistakably of salt. The ocean was calling its son home. That night, Naruto sat on his apartment's small balcony, watching the storm clouds roll across the sky. The rain had been falling for hours, but somehow he stayed completely dry despite sitting in the open air. Water just avoided him, flowing around him like he was made of something it didn't want to touch. Impressive party trick. He turned to find a woman sitting on his balcony railing, balanced perfectly despite the wind and rain. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, silver hair that moved like water, eyes that shifted color from blue to green to gray, and skin that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. But it was her voice that made Naruto's breath catch. He'd heard it before in dreams and half-remembered visions, calling to him from impossible depths. "Who are you?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "I think you can guess." She smiled, and for a moment her features shifted, becoming more familiar. Older, more regal, the face from Kakashi's ancient sketch, but softer, more motherly. "Hello, my son. You're not Poseidon." "No, I'm not." The woman's form solidified into something more human, though she still radiated an aura of barely contained power. "I'm Amphitrite, your father's wife. Your stepmother, I suppose." Naruto's mind reeled. Bad enough learning he was the son of a god, now he had divine family politics to worry about. "Are you here to kill me?" he asked, because in his experience, stepmothers in the old stories usually weren't thrilled about their husbands' illegitimate children. Amphitrite laughed, a sound like waves on a peaceful shore. "Kill you, child, I'm here to warn you, and to give you something you'll need for what's coming." "What's coming?" "Oceanus." The name fell from her lips like a curse. "The Titan of the sea. He's been imprisoned for millennia, but your display of power today, it's given him enough strength to manifest in this world. Partially, at least. What does he want?" "What all Titans want, to overthrow the current order and return to the old ways. But specifically, he wants you dead. You're proof that Poseidon's bloodline continues, that the Olympians still have influence in the mortal world. Killing you would be a symbolic victory, and it would deny your father one of his strongest potential allies." Naruto felt something cold settle in his stomach. Potential allies, I don't even know how to use these powers properly. You will, Amphitrite stood, moving with fluid grace to stand before him. You have your father's strength, but more than that, you have something he never possessed at your age. What's that? Compassion. The desire to protect others rather than simply rule them. She reached into what looked like empty air and withdrew something that made the storm itself seem to pause. This will help. It was a pendant, a simple chain holding what appeared to be a single drop of water frozen in crystal. But Naruto could feel the power radiating from it, vast and patient and older than civilization. What is it? A gift from your father. His blessing crystallized into something you can carry. She placed the chain around his neck, and instantly Naruto felt his connection to every body of water within miles strengthen dramatically. It won't make you invincible, but it will help you access your true heritage when you need it most. Why are you helping me? I'm not exactly legitimate family. Amphitrite's expression softened. Because you're Poseidon's son, and despite his many faults, I love your father. Because you're going to face things that would terrify most gods, and you deserve every advantage we can give you. And because, she paused, something almost maternal flickering across her features. Because I remember what it was like to be young and afraid and carrying more power than you knew what to do with. She began to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. Wait, Naruto called out. I have questions about my powers, about what I am about. You'll figure it out. Her voice was already distant like an echo across water. Trust yourself, Naruto Uzumaki. Trust your friends. And remember, the sea doesn't rage because it's angry. It rages because it cares too much about what it's protecting. And then she was gone, leaving only the scent of ocean spray and the pendant warm against Naruto's chest. He sat there for a long time, listening to the rain and feeling the new connection to his divine heritage settling into his bones like a welcome weight. Tomorrow, he would travel to the land of water to face an enemy older than the ninja villages. He would probably discover things about himself and his power that would change him forever. But tonight, for the first time since this all began, Naruto felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't facing it alone. The pendant pulsed once against his chest, warm as sunlight on deep water, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled like the approving voice of the sea itself. The boat to the land of water was supposed to be a 2-day journey. They made it in 16 hours. Naruto stood at the bow, one hand resting on the pendant Amphitrite had given him, watching the ocean respond to his presence in ways that made the crew nervous. The ship cut through water that was unnaturally calm, riding currents that shouldn't have existed, pushed by winds that came from precisely the right direction no matter which way they turned. This is not normal, the captain muttered for the dozenth time, checking his compass and finding it pointing in 3 different directions at once. Define normal, Sakura said dryly. She'd adapted to Naruto's increasingly obvious divine nature with the same practical acceptance she brought to everything else. If her teammate could command the ocean, then obviously they'd use that advantage to get where they needed to go faster. Kakashi was less sanguine about the whole situation. Their sensei stood near the stern, reading one of his books but clearly not paying attention to the words. Every few minutes his gaze would shift to Naruto, then to the impossibly cooperative ocean, then back to his book with the expression of someone trying to solve a particularly complex puzzle. Sensei, Naruto said without turning around, you've got that look again. What look? The one that means you're trying to figure out if I'm going to accidentally sink us all. The thought had crossed my mind. Kakashi closed his book and joined Naruto at the bow. That pendant, where did you get it? Naruto's hand went instinctively to the crystal hanging around his neck. He'd told them about Amphitrite's visit, though he'd left out some of the more personal details. My stepmother gave it to me. Apparently I have divine family I never knew about. And it does what exactly? Helps me access my heritage. Naruto looked down at the water rushing past the hull, noting how it seemed to glow faintly in his presence. I can feel every current for miles, every school of fish, every underwater ridge, every... He stopped talking, his attention suddenly focused on something in the distance. What is it? Sakura asked, joining them at the bow. There, Naruto pointed toward the horizon, where storm clouds were gathering with unnatural speed. That's not a normal weather pattern. As they watched, the clouds began to spiral, forming a massive whirlpool in the sky that mirrored the churning water beneath it. Lightning flickered in the storm's heart, but it was the wrong color, green and silver instead of white and blue. Maelstrom, the captain breathed from behind them. But it's too small and in the wrong season. That's not a natural maelstrom, Kurama warned in Naruto's mind. That's divine power. Something old and angry is making a statement. Can we go around it? Kakashi asked. The captain shook his head. Not if we want to reach the land of water. That storm's sitting right on our shipping lane. Naruto studied the supernatural weather system, feeling the way it pulled at his consciousness like a challenge. Whatever had created that maelstrom wanted him to know it was there. Wanted him to come closer. We go through it, he decided. Are you insane? Sakura demanded. That thing could tear the ship apart, not if I don't let it. Naruto turned to the captain. Get your crew below deck. This might get rough. Boy, I've been sailing these waters for 30 years, and I'm the son of Poseidon. The words came out with more authority than Naruto had intended, carrying undertones that made the ocean itself seem to listen. Trust me? The captain stared at him for a long moment, then apparently decided that arguing with a demigod was above his pay grade. Within minutes, the crew had battened down everything that could be secured and retreated to the safety of the lower decks. That left Team 7 alone on deck as their ship approached the edge of the supernatural storm. All right, Kakashi said, settling into a combat stance. What's the plan? Simple. Naruto placed both hands on the ship's railing, feeling his power flow out into the water around them. I talk to the ocean. You two keep me alive while I do it. The first waves hit them like liquid mountains, but instead of capsizing the ship, they lifted it gently, carrying it forward into the storm's embrace. The pendant around Naruto's neck blazed with blue-white light, and suddenly he could see the maelstrom for what it really was. It wasn't just a storm, it was a gateway. There's something on the other side, he called out over the wind. Something big? How big? Sakura shouted back, her pink hair whipping around her face. Before Naruto could answer, the ship crested the final wave and burst through the storm's eye into calm water on the other side. But the calm was deceptive. The ocean here felt deeper, older, like they'd sailed into a pocket of the primordial sea, and rising from those ancient depths was a city. Well, Kakashi said conversationally, that's new. The city was beautiful and terrible in equal measure, all flowing curves and impossible spires that seemed to be made of crystallized water. It rose from the ocean floor in defiance of every law of physics Naruto had ever learned, its towers reaching toward the surface like the fingers of a drowning giant. But it was the figure standing on the city's highest spire that made Naruto's blood run cold. Even at this distance, he could see the massive form clearly, easily 30 feet tall, with the bearing of ancient royalty and the presence of something that had ruled oceans before the continents had settled into their current positions. Water flowed around him like living cloth, and when he moved, tidal currents shifted in response. Oceanus, Naruto whispered, and the name seemed to carry across the water like a challenge. The Titan's voice rolled across the ocean like thunder made liquid. So, the little godling finally comes to face me. How delightfully predictable. What do you want? Naruto called back, his own voice somehow carrying just as clearly despite being purely human in origin. What I have always wanted, boy. To reclaim what was stolen from me when your father and his siblings overthrew the natural order. Oceanus gestured, and the city began to rise higher, water cascading from its foundations as it lifted toward the surface. But you represent something more immediate, proof that Poseidon's bloodline continues, evidence that the Olympians still meddle in mortal affairs. So you're going to kill me to make a point? Oh, child. I'm going to do so much more than that. The Titan's laughter was like waves breaking on rocks. I'm going to make you watch as I drown every coastal city in the ninja world. I'm going to show these mortals what happens when they harbor the spawn of my enemies. And then, when you're properly motivated, we're going to have a conversation about your future loyalties. Rage flared in Naruto's chest, hot and clean and utterly divine. The pendant around his neck pulsed in response, and suddenly the ocean around their small ship was glowing with the same blue-white light. You know what? Naruto said, his voice carrying across the water with the weight of storm winds. I'm really getting tired of people threatening my friends. He dove off the ship's bow. Naruto, Sakura screamed, but he was already hitting the water. And instead of sinking, he kept going down, breathing the ocean like it was air and moving through it like he'd been born in its depths. Which Naruto realized as he swam toward the rising city he essentially had been. The water around him was full of movement, sea creatures fleeing the disturbance, ancient currents being disrupted by Oceanus's city, and something else. Something that felt almost like, Kurama, he called out mentally, I'm here, Kit, and I have to say this is considerably more exciting than I expected. Can you help me fight underwater? Boy, I've been fighting since before these oceans existed. The question is whether you're ready to let me help properly. Naruto felt the offer behind Kurama's words, true partnership, not just the grudging cooperation they'd managed so far. The chance to combine Foxfire and divine power into something that could challenge a Titan. Do it, he decided. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. Kurama's chakra flowed through him like liquid sunlight, but instead of the burning heat he'd expected, it felt cool and clean, tempered by the ocean around them. His already enhanced strength doubled, then tripled, and suddenly he was moving through the water faster than any fish. The city's defenses activated as he approached, automated guardians that looked like sharks made of living metal, their eyes glowing with the same green light as Oceanus's lightning. They swarmed toward him in perfect formation, jaws wide and ready to tear him apart. Naruto gestured, and the ocean responded. Currents that had been flowing normally suddenly reversed, creating a whirlpool that caught the guardian sharks and held them in place. Then he closed his fist, and the water pressure around them increased until the metal predators crumpled like tin cans. Impressive, Kurama observed, but save some energy. The big fish is still waiting. As if summoned by the fox's words, Oceanus appeared in the water before them, moving with the fluid grace of something that had never needed to worry about breathing. Up close, the Titan was even more imposing, his features carved from storm and shadow, his presence vast enough to make the ocean itself seem small. "Clever boy," the ancient being rumbled, "but you're still just a child playing with powers you don't understand." He gestured, and the water around Naruto suddenly became thick as molasses, making movement almost impossible. But Naruto had been preparing for this. He reached out to Kurama's chakra and his own divine heritage simultaneously, creating a technique he'd never attempted before. Fire and water shouldn't have been able to coexist, but divine power had its own rules. Foxfire blazed around him in the depths, not burning the ocean but transforming it, turning the water into something that responded to his will rather than Oceanus's commands. The Titan's eyes widened in surprise as Naruto broke free of the binding technique and shot toward him like a guided missile, trailing divine fire and ocean spray in equal measure. Their collision shook the underwater city to its foundations. "Now that," Kurama said with deep satisfaction, "is more like it." Above them, Naruto could sense Kakashi and Sakura watching from the ship, probably wondering if their teammate had just committed very elaborate suicide. But down here in the depths, surrounded by the power of his father's domain and backed by the strength of the most powerful tailed beast, Naruto felt more alive than he ever had before. Oceanus recovered from the initial impact and counterattacked with the fury of ancient storms, but Naruto was ready for him. This was his element now, his birthright, and he was done letting other people threaten the things he cared about. The real battle was just beginning. The battle between a demigod and a titan at the bottom of the ocean was nothing like the stories made it sound. There was no dramatic dialogue, no pausing to explain techniques or motivations. Just raw, primal power colliding in the depths while reality bent around them like heated metal. Oceanus fought with the fury of eons, every strike carrying the weight of ancient grudges and cosmic betrayal. Naruto fought like someone who'd finally stopped running from what he was, and he was winning. Left. Kurama's voice cut through his consciousness as Oceanus's massive fist swept through the water where Naruto's head had been a split second earlier. Now up, he's vulnerable when he overextends. Naruto shot upward through the water, moving faster than any fish, trailing Foxfire that somehow blazed even in the ocean depths. His counterattack caught the Titan in the chest, divine power, entailed beast chakra combining into something that made Oceanus actually stumble backward. "Impossible," the ancient being snarled, water swirling around him like liquid armor. "You're barely more than a child." "Yeah, well," Naruto replied, floating in the crushing depths like they were shallow water, "I'm a fast learner." He gestured and the ocean responded. Not just the water immediately around them, but all of it. Every current within miles, every drop from surface to seafloor, every molecule that had ever known the touch of Poseidon's power. It rose at his command, forming a spiraling column of liquid force that dwarfed even Oceanus's impressive size. The Titan's eyes widened with something that might have been respect, or fear. "You cannot possibly control that much water," Oceanus said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "The strain would kill a mortal. Good thing I'm not entirely mortal." Naruto's pendant blazed with blue-white light, and suddenly he could feel every ocean on the planet, every sea that had ever known his father's touch. The power was intoxicating, vast beyond comprehension, and for a moment he understood why gods sometimes went mad with their own strength. Then Sakura's voice cut through the divine euphoria like a blade. Naruto. The city, he looked up, or thought he did, directions being somewhat negotiable at these depths, and saw what she meant. Oceanus's city was collapsing. The massive water spires that had been rising toward the surface were cracking under the pressure of Naruto's oceanic manipulation, and chunks of crystallized architecture were raining down into the abyss. But worse than that, he could sense the vibrations carrying through the water. His technique was so vast, so overwhelming, that it was affecting the ocean floor itself. Underwater landslides were beginning along the continental shelf. Tidal waves were building toward every coastline within 1,000 miles. If he didn't stop, he wouldn't just defeat Oceanus, he'd devastate half the ninja world in the process. Kit Kurama's voice was urgent in his mind. You need to pull back. This much power. I know. Naruto forced himself to release most of the ocean-spanning technique, keeping only enough water under his control to maintain the advantage over Oceanus. The relief was immediate but also disappointing. For just a moment, he'd felt what it was like to wield the full power of his divine heritage. It was addictive. Oceanus seemed to sense his internal struggle. You feel it, don't you, boy? The temptation of absolute power. Your father struggled with the same thing in his youth. I'm not my father. No, the Titan agreed, circling him like a shark scenting blood. You're weaker. Constrained by mortal attachments and foolish idealism, your power could reshape this world, but you waste it protecting insects. Those insects are my friends, my village, my family. Mortals die child, gods endure. Choose your loyalties accordingly. Instead of answering, Naruto did something that surprised both of them. He stopped fighting. The ocean around them settled into an uneasy calm as Naruto floated motionless, studying Oceanus with eyes that seemed older than his years. The Titan hesitated, clearly expecting some kind of trick, but Naruto just waited. You're not wrong, Naruto said finally. About the power, about what I could do if I really let go. He gestured, and a small whirlpool formed in the palm of his hand, not attacking, just demonstrating. I could probably level every coastal city in the ninja world, flood the inland areas, turn this entire region into a new ocean. Yes, Oceanus breathed, leaning forward with hungry anticipation. Finally, you begin to understand, but I won't. The simple words carried such absolute certainty that they seemed to ring through the water like struck metal. Oceanus pulled back as if he'd been slapped. What? I won't do it. Not to prove a point, not to win a war, not even to save my own life. Naruto's voice carried the weight of decision made and accepted, because that's not what heroes do. Heroes, Oceanus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Boy, heroes are myths mortals tell themselves to feel better about their own powerlessness. Reality is strength and weakness, predator and prey, power in those who lack it. You're wrong. Naruto began swimming upward, not retreating but changing the battlefield. Oceanus followed, drawn by curiosity or combat instinct. Heroes aren't myths. They're people who choose to do the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs them something. They broke the surface of the ocean together, erupting from the depths in twin columns of spray and foam. Above them, the sky was still dark with unnatural storm clouds. And in the distance, Naruto could see their ship riding the turbulent waves, while Kakashi and Sakura watched the battle with expressions somewhere between awe and terror. Your team is watching, Oceanus observed, treading water with the casual ease of something that had been born in the ocean. Shall we give them a proper show? Instead of attacking, Naruto closed his eyes and reached out to something he'd been sensing since the battle began. It was there in the depths of his consciousness, waiting patiently. The same power he'd touched during the Chunin exam preliminaries, the same energy that had flowed through him when he'd saved Inari from drowning. Sage mode. But not the toad-based sage mode that Jiraiya had tried to teach him. This was something else entirely, something that connected him to the ocean itself rather than to any single creature within it. The power flowed into him like a tide, and when he opened his eyes they had changed, still blue, but now with the depth and movement of deep water. Impossible, Oceanus whispered. Ocean Sage mode. That technique was lost millennia ago. Maybe it was waiting for the right person, Naruto suggested. He moved across the surface of the water like it was solid ground, each step creating ripples that spread outward in perfect circles. But these weren't ordinary ripples. They carried his power, his intent, and as they reached Oceanus, the Titan found himself caught in a web of energy that held him as effectively as physical chains. You cannot defeat me, boy. I am eternal. I am the sea itself made manifest. I don't need to defeat you. Naruto stopped just out of arm's reach, floating on the surface with perfect balance. I just need to understand you, and suddenly he did. The technique came instinctively, born from the combination of Sage Mode's enhanced perception and his divine heritage. He reached out not with his hands but with his consciousness, touching Oceanus's mind the way he'd learned to touch the ocean itself. What he found there was devastating. Loneliness. Rage, yes, but underneath it, a loneliness so vast and ancient that it made Naruto's own childhood isolation seem trivial by comparison. Oceanus hadn't just been defeated by the Olympians, he'd been forgotten, left to fade into myth while younger gods claimed dominion over domains that had once been his. "You're not angry because you lost," Naruto said quietly. "You're angry because nobody remembers what you used to be." The Titan's struggles against the binding technique ceased. For a moment, his expression was almost vulnerable. "What would you know of it, boy? You with your village and your friends and your future spread out before you like a feast. I know what it's like to be alone, to have people look at you and see only the dangerous thing you carry instead of who you really are." Naruto's voice was gentle, carrying none of the triumph of victory. "I know what it's like to want acknowledgement so badly that you'd do almost anything to get it. I am a Titan. I shaped the oceans before your father was even conceived. I do not need the acknowledgement of mortals." "No," Naruto agreed, "but you want it. You want to be remembered for what you were instead of what you've become." The binding technique dissolved as Naruto released it willingly, leaving Oceanus free to attack or flee as he chose. The Titan made no move to do either. "What are you proposing?" Oceanus asked finally. "A different kind of victory." Naruto gestured toward the storm clouds above them, which were already beginning to dissipate now that their creator's attention was elsewhere. "You stop attacking innocent people. I make sure the ninja world knows your story, not as a monster, but as what you really are, one of the first lords of the sea, deserving of respect. And in return, you get something my father never gave you. A choice: you can fade back into legend with dignity, or," Naruto paused, an idea forming, "or you can help me figure out how to use this power responsibly. God knows I could use the guidance." "That's either brilliant or suicidal," Kurama observed privately, "possibly both." Oceanus studied him for a long moment, ancient eyes searching for deception or hidden motives. Finally, he laughed, not the bitter sound from before, but something that held genuine amusement. "You would offer mentorship to someone who just tried to kill you. Wouldn't be the first time." Naruto glanced toward their ship, where he could see Kakashi preparing to dive in if the situation went sideways. "My sensei tried to murder me during our first training exercise. Admittedly, that was a test, but still. Your father would have simply destroyed me." "Yeah, well, I told you I'm not my father." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of waves lapping against invisible barriers. Finally, Oceanus nodded slowly. "Very well, young godling, I accept your terms. But know this, if you betray this trust, if you prove to be as arrogant and dismissive as the rest of your divine family, I will make you regret showing mercy." "Fair enough." Naruto extended his hand, wondering if Titans understood human gestures. "Partners?" Oceanus stared at the offered hand for a moment, then clasped it in his own massive grip. The contact sent a shock of power through both of them, and Naruto felt something settle into place in his consciousness, not dominance or submission, but understanding. "Balance, partners," the Titan agreed. "Though I reserve the right to criticize your technique. Ocean Sage Mode, indeed, your form is atrocious." The journey back to the ship took considerably longer than the trip out, partly because Oceanus insisted on traveling at a more dignified pace, and partly because they had to stop every few minutes for the Titan to point out flaws in Naruto's water manipulation techniques. No, you're fighting the current instead of working with it," Oceanus rumbled as they approached the ship. "Water has its own will, boy. Respect it and it will serve you. Dominate it and it will eventually turn on you." "That's not what it felt like during our fight," Naruto protested. "During our fight, you were channeling your father's arrogance, trying to impose your will through raw power. It worked barely, but it was inefficient and dangerous." By the time they reached the ship, Kakashi and Sakura had managed to drop a rope ladder over the side. Naruto climbed aboard dripping wet but grinning, while Oceanus simply rose out of the water on a platform of crystallized sea foam. "So," Kakashi said, his visible eye taking in the massive Titan with the kind of calm that came from years of dealing with impossible situations, "this is Oceanus. He's going to help me learn to use my powers properly." Naruto glanced at his divine mentor, assuming he can shrink down to something that won't sink the ship. "I am not some carnival trick to be," Oceanus began, then sighed. "Though I suppose discretion has its merits." The transformation was gradual but impressive. the Titan's massive form condensing until he appeared to be merely a very tall, very imposing man with silver blue hair and the bearing of ancient nobility. He stepped onto the ship's deck with fluid grace, and the wood didn't even creak under his weight. "Better?" he asked dryly. "Much." Sakura was staring at him with the expression of someone trying to process the fact that they were now traveling with a being older than civilization. "So you're really going to help Naruto after trying to kill him?" He made a compelling argument. Oceanus settled against the ship's railing, looking out at the ocean with possessive fondness. "Besides, it has been some time since I had a proper student. This should prove educational." "Great," Naruto said, settling beside him. "So where do we start?" "With the basics you should have learned years ago." Oceanus gestured toward the water surrounding their ship. "Tell me, boy, what do you feel when you touch the ocean?" Naruto closed his eyes and extended his consciousness toward the water. "Power, vastness, like it goes on forever." "Wrong. Try again, but I can feel. You feel your own power reflected back at you, the ocean responding to your divine heritage." Oceanus's voice carried the patience of someone who had taught students before. "But what does the water itself feel? What does it want?" This time, Naruto tried to quiet his own presence to listen instead of projecting. The difference was immediate and startling. The ocean wasn't just vast, it was alive. Not in the way that fish or whales were alive, but with its own ancient consciousness, its own desires and fears and dreams. It had moods, preferences, memories that stretched back to the formation of the world itself. And it was lonely. "It wants connection," Naruto said softly. "It wants to be understood instead of just used." "Better." There was approval in Oceanus's voice. "Much better. Your father never learned that lesson, even after millennia of dominion. He commands the sea through divine authority. You could learn to partner with it instead." "Is that what you did, once upon a time?" The Titan's expression grew distant. "Before the war, before the defeat, when the oceans and I were one will expressed through different forms. It was beautiful." The ship sailed on through increasingly calm waters, and Naruto found himself listening with rapt attention as Oceanus began to describe techniques that had been forgotten before the ninja villages were even conceived. Ways of moving through water that were more like becoming water. Methods for calling storms that worked with weather patterns instead of forcing them. The secret of breathing underwater that had nothing to do with holding air in your lungs. "These abilities," Sakura asked during a break in the lesson, "they're all because of Naruto's divine heritage." "Partly." Oceanus glanced at her with something like respect. "But heritage alone isn't enough. Power without wisdom is just destruction waiting for an excuse. The boy has something rarer, the desire to use strength in service of others rather than himself. He gets that from his human side," Kakashi observed. "Kushina was the same way, so was Minato. Yes, I can see their influence in him. It makes him stronger, not weaker, though it will also make his path more difficult." Oceanus looked ahead toward the distant coastline of the land of water. "Speaking of which, we should discuss what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, boy, that your display of power today will have consequences. Every supernatural entity with any degree of sensitivity will know that something significant happened here. Gods, spirits, monsters, they'll all be taking a renewed interest in your activities." Naruto felt his stomach sink. "More people trying to kill me?" "Some, certainly. Others will want to recruit you, or study you, or simply observe to see what you become. Your childhood as a normal ninja is effectively over." "It was already over," Naruto pointed out. "The moment I learned what I really was." "True, but now others know it as well. That changes the game entirely." As if summoned by his words, a new presence made itself known on the horizon. Not hostile exactly, but powerful and purposeful, and heading directly for their ship. "What now?" Sakura muttered. Oceanus studied the approaching disturbance with the expression of someone recognizing an old acquaintance. "Ah, it seems word of our resolution has reached interested parties." "Who?" Naruto asked, though he was already reaching for his pendant, feeling divine power flow through him in preparation for whatever came next. "Unless I'm much mistaken," Oceanus said with something that might have been amusement, "your father." The ocean around their ship suddenly became mirror-smooth, and the sky above them cleared of every cloud. In the distance, a figure was walking across the surface of the water toward them, moving with the casual authority of someone to whom the sea was merely another road. Naruto's pendant blazed with light, and for the first time since this all began, he could clearly see the face from his dreams and visions. Older than Oceanus, but somehow more vital, with eyes like deep water and power that made the air itself feel charged with potential. Poseidon, Lord of the Seas, was coming to meet his son. And Naruto found himself wondering if he was ready for whatever that conversation was going to bring. This should be interesting, Kurama observed with dark amusement. Family reunions are always so complicated when divine politics get involved. Tell me about it, Naruto muttered, then straightened his shoulders and prepared to meet his divine father for the first time. The real adventure, he suspected, was just beginning. Poseidon walked across the ocean like it was solid ground, each step creating ripples that spread outward in perfect concentric circles. He was taller than Naruto had expected, not giant like Oceanus in his true form, but with the kind of presence that made size irrelevant. His hair was the color of deep water, his skin bronzed by countless years under the sun, and his eyes held the weight of oceans. But what struck Naruto most wasn't the divine power radiating from his father, it was how nervous the man looked. Well, Oceanus murmured from his position at the ship's railing, this should be entertaining. Poseidon came to a stop beside their vessel, standing on the ocean's surface with his hands clasped behind his back. Up close, Naruto could see the family resemblance more clearly. The same stubborn jawline, the same way of tilting his head when thinking, even the same tendency to fidget with his hair when uncertain. Naruto, Poseidon said, and his voice carried the sound of waves on distant shores. You've grown. Yeah, well, Naruto replied, not sure what else to say to the god who'd fathered him. That's what happens when you don't stick around to watch. Sakura made a small choking sound. Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly. Even Oceanus looked impressed by the casual way Naruto had just sassed the Lord of the Seas. Poseidon, to his credit, winced. I deserved that. You deserved worse than that, Naruto shot back, years of anger and confusion finally finding a target. Do you know what it was like growing up not knowing who I was, having power I couldn't understand, being hunted by monsters because of something I didn't even know I'd inherited? Yes, Poseidon said quietly, and the simple admission took the wind out of Naruto's sails. I know exactly what it was like because I watched. I've been watching you your entire life, Naruto. Every victory, every defeat, every moment you chose compassion over vengeance despite having every reason to do the opposite. Then why didn't you help me? Poseidon gestured, and a platform of crystallized water rose from the ocean to bring him level with the ship's deck. He stepped aboard with fluid grace, and suddenly the small vessel felt much more crowded. Because I was a coward, he said simply. Because I was afraid that my presence in your life would bring you more danger than protection. Because I told myself that Minato and Kushina could give you something I never could, a normal childhood. Normal, Naruto laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was the village pariah. The monster boy with the demon fox locked inside him, the dead last who couldn't do anything right, that's what you call normal? No, Poseidon's expression grew pained. That's what I call the worst mistake I've ever made. And I've made quite a few over the millennia. The ship rocked gently in the waves, the only sound the creaking of wood and rigging. Kakashi and Sakura stood frozen by the cabin, probably wondering if they should intervene or just try to become invisible. Oceanus watched the exchange with the detached interest of someone observing a particularly fascinating experiment. You want to know the truth, Poseidon continued when Naruto didn't respond. I fell in love with your mother the moment I met her. Not just with her beauty, though Kushina was certainly beautiful, but with her spirit. Her determination to protect others even at the cost of her own safety. Her refusal to back down from any challenge. She was married, Naruto said flatly. She was engaged, and she loved Minato deeply, which I respected. What happened between us? Poseidon paused, choosing his words carefully. It was one night during a terrible storm that would have killed everyone on her diplomatic vessel. I saved them, she thanked me, and for just a few hours we forgot about duty and politics and the complications of mortal divine relationships. And then you left. And then I left, Poseidon agreed. Because that's what gods do, Naruto. We love intensely and briefly, and then we move on to other concerns, other worlds, other responsibilities. It's not malicious, it's just our nature. Well, your nature sucks, Naruto said bluntly. Poseidon actually smiled at that. Yes, it does, which is why I'm here now trying to make amends for 16 years of cowardice. 16 years too late, perhaps. But I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Naruto stared at him, this divine being who claimed to want a relationship after more than a decade of absence. Part of him wanted to tell Poseidon exactly where he could stick his guilt and good intentions. But another part, the part that had always wondered what it would be like to have a father who understood him, was curious despite itself. What would that even look like? He asked finally. You being my father, I mean, do we have family dinners? Do you come to my graduation ceremony? Do you ground me when I get in trouble? I honestly have no idea. Poseidon's admission was startling in its honesty. I've never tried to maintain a relationship with any of my demigod children. Usually they're either killed by monsters before they reach adulthood, or they become so powerful that they no longer need parental guidance. Encouraging. The point is, Poseidon continued, you're not usual. You've survived longer than most, grown stronger than I expected, and somehow managed to maintain your humanity despite everything you've endured. You defeated Oceanus not through raw power, but through understanding and compassion. I didn't defeat anyone, Naruto protested, glancing at the Titan who was pretending not to listen to every word. We came to an understanding. Exactly. Poseidon's expression grew proud. Do you know how many of my children would have thought to offer mercy to an enemy, would have seen past their own anger to recognize another being's pain? Probably not many, considering you weren't around to teach them better. Oceanus made a sound that might have been suppressed laughter. Poseidon shot him a warning look, which the Titan ignored with dignified amusement. You're not going to make this easy, are you? Poseidon asked. Why should I? Naruto crossed his arms. You had 16 years to figure out how to be my father. I'm not going to just pretend that doesn't matter because you finally decided to show up. Fair enough. Poseidon nodded, then did something unexpected. He sat down on the ship's deck, bringing himself to Naruto's eye level. The casual gesture somehow made him seem less divine and more human. Then let me start with something I should have said years ago. I'm proud of you, son. The words hit harder than Naruto had expected. He'd heard praise before from Iruka, from Kakashi, even from the third Hokage, but this was different. This was acknowledgement from someone who shared his blood, his power, his nature. Proud of what? He asked, his voice rougher than intended. Of who you've become, of the choices you've made, of the way you've used incredible power not to dominate others but to protect them. Poseidon's voice grew quiet. I was older than you are now when I first killed someone out of anger rather than necessity. You've had that power for months, and you've never once used it selfishly. I've been tempted. Of course you have. Power without temptation isn't virtue, it's just lack of opportunity. The fact that you've resisted those temptations, even when you had every reason to give in to them, tells me more about your character than any feat of strength ever could. Naruto found himself studying his father's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But all he saw was genuine regret and what looked like hope. So what happens now? He asked. Now I do what I should have done from the beginning. I help you learn to control your heritage. I teach you about the divine world and its politics. I try to prepare you for the challenges that are coming. What challenges? Poseidon and Oceanus exchanged a look that Naruto didn't like at all. Your display of power today sent ripples through both the mortal and divine realms, Poseidon explained. Every god with any interest in this world now knows that my son has awakened to his full potential. Some will want to recruit you. Others will see you as a threat to be eliminated. More monsters. Gods, Naruto, not just monsters, but actual deities who might decide that a demigod with your level of power is too dangerous to be allowed free reign. Poseidon's expression grew grim. My brothers, for instance, are not known for their tolerance of potential rivals. Your brothers, Zeus and Hades, the kings of sky and underworld respectively. Oceanus spoke up, his voice carrying ancient disdain. Paranoid, petty, and powerful, a dangerous combination. They would try to kill their own nephew. They've killed their own children when they felt threatened, Poseidon said bluntly. Blood relation means little when divine politics are involved. Naruto felt something cold settle in his stomach. Bad enough learning he had a divine father, now he had to worry about divine uncles who might want him dead. This is insane, Sakura said, speaking up for the first time since Poseidon had arrived. You're talking about gods trying to murder a 16-year-old boy because he's too strong. Welcome to divine politics, Oceanus said dryly, where every relationship is a potential threat and every power is measured against everyone else's. But we're not going to let that happen, Poseidon added quickly, his attention returning to Naruto. I know I haven't been there for you before, but I'm here now, and I intend to make sure you have everything you need to protect yourself and the people you care about. How? Training. Real training, not the basic techniques you've been figuring out on your own. I want to teach you to fully access your divine heritage, to understand the extent of your powers, to fight like the son of a sea god rather than just a ninja with unusual abilities. Naruto glanced at his teammates, who were listening to this conversation with expressions somewhere between fascination and terror. What about them? What about my village? I can't just disappear for years of training. Who said anything about disappearing? Poseidon smiled. One advantage of being a god, I'm not limited by normal concepts of time and space. I can accelerate your training, compress months of learning into days. You'll be stronger without losing the connections that make you who you are. Is that really possible? Boy, Oceanus interjected, you're speaking to beings who helped shape reality itself. Manipulating time and space for training purposes is child's play, though it will be intensive, Poseidon warned. Exhausting in ways you can't imagine. You'll be pushed to your absolute limits, forced to confront aspects of your power that you've barely touched. Are you ready for that? Naruto looked out at the ocean surrounding them, feeling the way it responded to his presence like a living thing. He thought about the monsters that would keep coming, the gods who might want him dead, the innocent people who would suffer if he wasn't strong enough to protect them. When do we start? He asked. Poseidon's smile was like sunrise over water. Right now, if you're willing. Wait, Kakashi interrupted, finally speaking up. What about us? Naruto's part of Team 7. He has responsibilities to the village. And he'll fulfill them, Poseidon replied. Better than he could before once he understands what he's truly capable of. But you're welcome to observe the training if you wish. It might be educational. Educational how? Well, Oceanus said with dark amusement, you'll learn what it looks like when a demigod stops holding back. Naruto felt a mixture of anticipation and terror as he realized what they were proposing. Real training, divine training. The chance to finally understand and control the power that had been growing inside him since the day he'd first made water dance to his will. But also the knowledge that once he took this step, there would be no going back to pretending he was just another ninja with unusual techniques. This would change him fundamentally, and he wasn't sure what he'd become on the other side. All right, he said, decision made. Let's do this. Poseidon nodded and gestured toward the ocean. The water around their ship began to glow with the same blue-white light as Naruto's pendant, and suddenly the very air felt charged with potential. Lesson 1, his father said, divine power making his voice carry the authority of storm winds and tidal waves. Stop thinking like a human who happens to have divine abilities. Start thinking like a god who chooses to care about humans. As the ocean began to reshape itself around them, creating a training ground that defied every law of physics Naruto had ever learned, he realized that his life as a simple ninja from the Hidden Leaf Village was truly over. What came next would either make him strong enough to protect everything he cared about or powerful enough to destroy it all by accident. Either way, there was no turning back. The real education was about to begin. 3 weeks of training with a sea god turned out to be exactly as exhausting as Poseidon had warned. Naruto floated in the center of a water sphere 50 feet across, practicing a technique that had no name in any human language. Around him, currents moved in impossible patterns, responding to thoughts rather than gestures, while pressure that should have crushed him felt as gentle as a summer breeze. Better, Poseidon called from outside the sphere, his voice carrying clearly through the water. But you're still thinking in terms of control. The ocean doesn't want to be controlled, Naruto. It wants to be understood. Easy for you to say, Naruto muttered, then immediately regretted it as salt water filled his mouth. Even after weeks of practice, talking underwater still felt unnatural. You've had millennia to figure this out. And you have days, Oceanus added from his position on a floating platform nearby. The Titan had proven to be an unexpectedly effective teacher, probably because he remembered what it was like to learn divine techniques rather than simply having them as part of his nature. Which means you can't afford to waste time on self-doubt. The training had been relentless but effective. Naruto could now breathe underwater as easily as air, move through the ocean at speeds that would make most fish jealous, and manipulate water on a scale that dwarfed his previous abilities. But more than that, he was beginning to understand the ocean as a living entity with its own moods and desires. It was intoxicating and terrifying. Enough for today, Poseidon decided, gesturing for Naruto to surface. The water sphere collapsed gently, depositing him on the deck of their ship, though ship was probably the wrong word for their current vessel. What had started as a simple fishing boat had been transformed by divine power into something that was part sailing ship, part underwater palace, and part training facility. Kakashi and Sakura watched from the bow as Naruto toweled off, both of them looking slightly overwhelmed by what they'd witnessed over the past weeks. Their sensei had taken detailed notes on every technique demonstrated, probably planning to write the most classified mission report in ninja history. Sakura had spent most of her time asking questions about divine physiology and energy manipulation, treating the whole experience like the world's most dangerous medical exam. "How do you feel?" Poseidon asked, settling beside his son on the deck. Naruto considered the question. Physically, he felt stronger than he ever had, divine power flowing through his body like a second bloodstream, enhancing every movement and thought. Mentally, he was exhausted from processing concepts that human language barely had words for, but emotionally, different, he said finally. "Like I'm becoming something I wasn't before. That's natural. Power changes you, especially power of this magnitude. The question is whether you're changing into something you want to be." Before Naruto could answer, the ocean around them began to shift. Not violently, but with the purposeful movement of water making way for something large approaching from the depths. "What now?" Sakura asked, though she was already reaching for her medical supplies out of habit. Poseidon's expression grew tense. "I was hoping we'd have more time before this happened." A new voice cut across the water, carrying the authority of storm winds and lightning. "Brother, we need to talk." The figure that rose from the ocean made Poseidon look modest by comparison. Easily 8 feet tall, with silver hair that moved like living electricity and eyes that sparked with barely contained power, the newcomer radiated the kind of presence that made the air itself feel charged. "Zeus," Poseidon said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" The king of the gods stepped onto their vessel without invitation, his presence immediately making the ship feel cramped. "Your son has been making quite a spectacle of himself. Defeating titans, commanding storms, displaying power that rivals some of the Olympians themselves. Did you think the rest of us wouldn't notice?" Naruto felt his father tense beside him, divine power flickering around Poseidon like heat lightning. "Naruto is learning to control his heritage. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Zeus laughed, and thunder rumbled in the clear sky above them. "The boy just spent 3 weeks mastering techniques that take most demigods centuries to learn. He's achieved Ocean Sage mode, something that was supposedly lost forever. And according to my sources, he's been having conversations with the nine-tailed fox as if they were old friends." "Your uncle seems well-informed," Kurama observed dryly in Naruto's mind. "I don't suppose you want to mention that we've been sharing power techniques." "Definitely not," Naruto thought back. "What do you want, Zeus?" Poseidon asked bluntly. "I want to know where your son's loyalties lie, the divine realm. The mortal world, because from where I'm sitting, he looks like a potential threat to both." "I'm right here," Naruto said, standing up to face his divine uncle. At 16, he was still shorter than Zeus, but divine power had given him a presence that made height irrelevant. "You want to know about my loyalties? Ask me directly." Zeus turned those lightning-bright eyes on him, and Naruto felt the weight of divine attention like a physical force. "Very well, nephew. Where do your loyalties lie? With the people I care about." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters." Naruto gestured toward Kakashi and Sakura. "My team, my village. The innocent people who get hurt when gods and monsters use the mortal world as their battlefield. I don't care if they're human or divine or something in between. If they need protection, I'll protect them. Even if protecting mortals means opposing the will of the gods." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Naruto could feel both Poseidon and Oceanus watching him, waiting to see how he'd respond to this fundamental test of divine politics. "Especially then," Naruto said. Zeus's expression darkened. Literally, storm clouds began gathering overhead as his mood shifted. "That attitude is exactly what I was afraid of. You think you can stand between two worlds, serving both and answering to neither. But that's not how power works, boy. Eventually, you'll have to choose." "No, I won't. You will, and when that moment comes, you'll learn the price of trying to serve too many masters." Zeus began to back away, preparing to leave. "Consider this a warning, nephew. The Olympians have dealt with rebellious demigods before. We know how these stories end." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. Step out of line, boy, and you'll discover why mortals once built temples to appease us rather than simply ignoring our existence." He vanished in a flash of lightning that left the smell of ozone and burning air behind. The storm clouds dissipated slowly, leaving an uncomfortable silence on the deck. "Well," Oceanus said finally, "that went better than expected." "Better?" Sakura stared at him. "He just threatened to kill Naruto." "Oh, Zeus threatens to kill people all the time. The fact that he gave a warning first means he's actually being reasonable by his standards." Poseidon was studying Naruto with an expression somewhere between pride and concern. "You realize what you just did, don't you? Stood up to a bully. You declared your independence from divine authority in front of the king of the gods." Poseidon shook his head. That's either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish. Maybe both, Naruto admitted, but I meant what I said. I won't choose between protecting humans and respecting gods. There has to be another way. Kit, Kurama's voice was unusually serious. You might want to brace yourself. Someone else is coming and this one feels different. Naruto reached out with his enhanced senses, feeling for disturbances in the water around them. What he found was subtle but unmistakable, another divine presence approaching, but this one moved with calculated precision rather than Zeus's dramatic flair. Who now? Kakashi asked, clearly reaching the end of his patience with divine interruptions. The figure that emerged from the sea was smaller than Zeus, but no less impressive. She appeared to be a woman in her 30s, with gray eyes that held the weight of accumulated wisdom and an aura of quiet authority that made even Poseidon straighten unconsciously. Athena, he said, inclining his head slightly. Sister, brother, and this must be my nephew. Athena's attention fixed on Naruto with laser focus. The young man who thinks he can bridge two worlds through noble intentions alone. Here we go again, Naruto muttered. I heard about your conversation with Zeus. Impressive display of courage, if somewhat lacking in wisdom. Athena stepped onto the deck with fluid grace, but courage without intelligence is just another form of stupidity. And you're here to test my intelligence. I'm here to offer you a choice. Athena gestured, and suddenly they were no longer on the ocean. The ship, the water, even the sky had vanished, replaced by what looked like an ancient Greek amphitheater carved from white marble. In the center of the arena stood a young man about Naruto's age, wearing bronze armor and carrying a spear that gleamed with its own internal light. His eyes held the same gray wisdom as Athena's, and when he moved, it was with the precision of someone trained in warfare from birth. My champion, Athena announced. Marcus, son of wisdom and strategy, raised to understand that gods are meant to rule and mortals are meant to serve. He will test whether your idealism can survive contact with reality. I don't want to fight him, Naruto said. Of course you don't, but he wants to fight you. Athena's voice carried subtle mockery. You see, Marcus believes that your philosophy, that gods and mortals can coexist as equals, is not just wrong but dangerous. He thinks that by defeating you in single combat, he can prove that strength belongs with those wise enough to use it properly. The champion stepped forward, raising his spear in formal challenge. Naruto Uzumaki, son of Poseidon, I call you to account for your blasphemous words. Face me in honorable combat, or admit that your ideals are worth nothing when opposed by superior force. Oh, he's good, Kurama observed. Putting it in terms you can't refuse without losing face. Athena trained him well. Naruto looked around the arena, taking in the divine architecture and the sense of ancient power permeating every stone. And if I refuse, then you prove Zeus right, Athena said simply. That when forced to choose between your mortal friends and divine authority, you'll choose the path of least resistance. That your noble words mean nothing when tested by actual conflict. And if you win, Marcus said, then perhaps there's something to be said for your philosophy after all. But I don't intend to lose. Naruto glanced back at his teammates, who had been brought along for this divine transportation whether they wanted to be or not. Kakashi was studying the arena with tactical eyes, probably planning escape routes. Sakura was watching him with the expression of someone trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. His father and Oceanus stood nearby, both clearly wanting to interfere but held back by divine politics and the rules of formal challenge. Fine, Naruto said, stepping into the center of the arena. But when I win, we do this my way. No more threats, no more tests. You let me prove that gods and mortals can work together. Agreed, Athena said. Though you should know Marcus has never lost a fight, ever. The champion lowered into a combat stance, spear held with professional competence. Are you ready, false prince? Instead of answering, Naruto closed his eyes and reached out to the power Poseidon had helped him unlock over the past weeks. But this time he didn't try to dominate or control it. He simply asked. The response was immediate. Water rose from hidden sources beneath the arena, not in dramatic torrents but in precise streams that moved like living things. At the same time, he felt Kurama's chakra blending with his divine heritage, creating something that was neither purely human nor purely godlike. When he opened his eyes, they had changed, still blue, but now with depths that seemed to go on forever. Ready, he said. Marcus attacked immediately, moving with inhuman speed and precision. His spear thrust should have taken Naruto in the chest, but water flowed around the weapon like it was alive, deflecting the strike without stopping it entirely. The fight that followed was unlike anything Naruto had experienced before. Marcus fought like wisdom made manifest, every move calculated, every strike designed to create openings for the next attack. He was stronger than any human, faster than most ninja, and skilled enough to make even Kakashi look clumsy by comparison. But Naruto had something Marcus didn't: the ability to think like both a god and a mortal simultaneously. Instead of trying to overpower his opponent, he flowed around him. Instead of forcing the water to obey, he asked it to help. Instead of fighting with divine arrogance or human determination alone, he combined them into something new. The breakthrough came when Marcus landed a solid hit, his spear point drawing blood from Naruto's shoulder. The wound should have slowed him down, but instead it triggered something deeper, not just divine power or tailed beast chakra, but the synthesis of everything he was. "I get it now," he said, dodging another spear thrust and countering with a technique that had no name. "You're not trying to prove that gods should rule mortals, you're trying to prove that power justifies itself." "Power guided by wisdom," Marcus corrected, pressing his attack. "Order imposed by those capable of maintaining it. But that's not wisdom, that's just fear dressed up in fancy words." Naruto gestured, and the water around them rose in spirals that defied gravity. But instead of attacking with it, he created something beautiful, patterns of liquid light that danced through the air like living art. Real wisdom means knowing when not to use power. Real strength means protecting people who can't protect themselves, not ruling them because you can. For the first time since the fight began, Marcus hesitated. His spear wavered as he stared at the impossible beauty Naruto was creating with his divine abilities. "This is what I'm fighting for," Naruto continued, the water around him forming shapes that told stories. A village saved from a flood, children playing safely by a river, two former enemies working together for the common good. Not the right to rule, but the privilege to serve. Not power over others, but power used for others. Marcus lowered his spear entirely, his gray eyes wide with something that might have been wonder. "You're not trying to defeat me. I'm trying to show you there's another way." The young champion looked around the arena, taking in the water sculptures and the expressions of everyone watching. Finally, he set his spear aside entirely and bowed formally. "I yield," he said, "not because you overpowered me, but because you've shown me something I'd never considered. The possibility that strength and compassion aren't opposites." The arena began to dissolve around them, white marble fading back into ocean and sky. As their ship reformed beneath their feet, Athena studied Naruto with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Interesting," she said finally. "Zeus expected you to win through raw power. I expected you to lose to superior strategy. Instead, you chose a third option entirely. Is that good or bad? It's unprecedented. Which means it's either brilliant or catastrophically naive." She began to fade like morning mist. "I suppose we'll find out which." As his divine aunt disappeared, Naruto found himself back on their ship with his teammates and teachers, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to concern. "So," Kakashi said after a long moment, "that happened." "Yeah," Naruto settled onto the deck, suddenly exhausted by everything that had occurred. "I think I'm starting to understand what my father meant about divine politics being complicated." Poseidon sat beside him, divine power flickering around them both like shared warmth. "You did well, son, better than I expected, honestly." "What happens now?" "Now," Oceanus said, "you've officially declared yourself to be something new in the world. Not fully divine, not entirely mortal, but a bridge between both. That will make you valuable to some people and terrifying to others. Great, more enemies? Probably, but also more allies than you might expect." Poseidon squeezed his shoulder. "Gods and mortals both will be watching to see if your philosophy can work in practice, not just in theory." As their ship began moving toward the land of water's coastline, their original mission objective finally within reach, Naruto found himself thinking about everything that had changed over the past few weeks. He was stronger now, more confident in his abilities, and clearer about his purpose than he'd ever been. But he was also more aware of how much responsibility came with the power he'd inherited. Every choice he made now would be scrutinized by gods and mortals alike, either as proof that his way could work or evidence that he was dangerously naive. "Heavy thoughts for someone so young," Kurama observed. "Yeah, well," Naruto replied silently, watching the coastline grow larger in the distance. "I guess that's the price of trying to change the world." "Worth it." Naruto thought about Marcus's final bow, about the hope in his teammates' eyes, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, gods and mortals could learn to see each other as something other than threats or tools. Yeah, he said aloud, not caring if the others heard him talking to his inner demon. I think it is. Above them, storm clouds were gathering again, but for once they felt like promise rather than threat. The real work was just beginning, but at least now Naruto knew exactly what he was working toward. A world where power served wisdom, where strength protected the vulnerable, and where being different didn't have to mean being alone. It was a big dream for a 16-year-old former dead last. But then again, he was the son of a sea god. Big dreams seemed appropriate. The harbor town of Kaido was drowning. Not metaphorically, literally drowning, as massive waves crashed over the seawalls and flooded the streets with relentless fury. But these weren't natural tsunamis. The water moved with purpose, forming tentacles and spirals that reached for fleeing civilians with predatory intelligence. Sea serpents, Oceanus identified grimly as their ship approached the chaos. Ancient ones, by the look of them. Someone's been very busy while we were dealing with your divine family. Naruto stood at the bow, feeling the wrongness in the water like a physical ache. The ocean here was in pain, twisted by some external force into shapes it didn't want to take. Whatever was causing this had been torturing the sea itself. Can you stop it? Sakura asked, medical supplies already in hand, despite the fact that they were still half a mile from shore. I can try. Naruto reached out with his enhanced senses, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. What he found made his blood run cold. There's someone down there. Someone powerful, and they're not just controlling the water, they're poisoning it. I can feel it too, Kurama added. Divine power, but corrupted, twisted into something that feeds on suffering rather than protecting life. One of Zeus's agents, Kakashi suggested, though he was already preparing for combat. No, Poseidon said, his expression dark with recognition. This feels like, but that's impossible. She was banished centuries ago. Who was banished? Naruto demanded. Before his father could answer, the ocean around their ship exploded upward in a geyser of corrupted water. From its heart emerged a figure that made even Oceanus look small by comparison. A woman whose beauty was both perfect and terrible, with hair like seaweed and skin that shifted between human flesh and scaled hide. But it was her eyes that made Naruto's breath catch. They burned with the same divine light as Poseidon's, but where his father's gaze held the depth of peaceful oceans, hers contained the fury of storms that destroyed everything they touched. Hello, brother, the figure said, her voice carrying across the water like the crash of waves on rocks. Miss me? Amphitrite, Poseidon breathed, and Naruto realized with shock that this was his stepmother, but not the gentle figure who had given him the pendant. This was something twisted, corrupted by centuries of exile and rage. Not quite, the creature replied, and her form rippled like disturbed water. I am what she became after you cast her aside for your precious mortals. I am her pain-given form, her love turned to hatred, her devotion transformed into vengeance. You're not real, Poseidon said, but his voice carried uncertainty. Amphitrite is dead, the false goddess laughed, and the sound sent new waves crashing into the harbor town. Oh, she's very much alive, dear husband, just changed. Centuries of exile tend to alter one's perspective on love and loyalty. Naruto felt something twist in his chest as he watched more civilians flee the rising waters. Whatever family drama was playing out here, innocent people were paying the price. Stop, he said, his voice carrying across the water with divine authority. Leave them alone. Your fight is with us, not with them. The corrupted Amphitrite turned her burning gaze on him, and Naruto felt the weight of ancient power pressing against his consciousness. Ah, the little godling speaks. Tell me, boy, do you know what your birth cost me? Do you understand what it means for a god's wife to watch him father children with mortals while she remains faithful and forgotten? I know what it's like to grow up without understanding why I was different, Naruto replied, moving to the front of the ship. I know what it's like to be alone and angry and wanting someone to blame for the pain. You know nothing. Water rose around her like liquid wings, and suddenly the ocean for miles around began to churn. You have your father's attention now, his love, his pride. I had centuries of neglect of watching him chase after every pretty mortal who caught his eye. The pendant around Naruto's neck began to glow, and suddenly he could sense something else in the water, a presence that felt familiar, warm, and distinctly different from the creature attacking them. The real one is still there, Kurama observed, trapped inside that shell of corruption but alive. The question is whether you can reach her. You're not Amphitrite, Naruto said with sudden certainty. You're her pain, her anger, but not her. She's still in there somewhere, isn't she? The creature's perfect features twisted with rage. Clever boy. Yes, the weak, loving part of her still exists. Shall I let you speak with her before I drown you all? For a moment, the corruption seemed to fade, and Naruto saw the woman who had visited him on his balcony, tired, sad, but still carrying traces of the gentleness she'd shown him. "Naruto," the real Amphitrite whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm sorry. I tried to fight it, but the pain, the loneliness. It's been so long since anyone cared whether I existed." "I care," Naruto said, and meant it. "Your family, weird, complicated, divine family, but still family." "Pretty words," the corruption snarled, reasserting control. "But words won't save your precious mortals from drowning." More water rose from the harbor, forming massive tentacles that reached for the fleeing townspeople. But before they could strike, Naruto was moving. He didn't dive off the ship this time, he walked. Each step took him across the surface of the ocean as if it were solid ground, divine power flowing through him like a second bloodstream. But this wasn't the raw, overwhelming force he'd wielded against Oceanus. This was precise, controlled, shaped by weeks of training and tempered by understanding. "I won't let you hurt them," he said, placing himself between the attacking waters and the town. "You cannot stop the ocean itself, boy." "You're right," Naruto agreed, then did something that surprised everyone present, including himself. "I can't stop the ocean, but I can ask it to remember what it really wants to be." He reached out, not with power but with understanding, touching the corrupted water with the same gentleness Amphitrite had once shown him. And slowly, incredibly, the ocean began to respond. The attacking tentacles slowed, then stopped, then began to change. The murky, corrupted water cleared, becoming crystal blue once again. The violent waves settled into gentle swells. The very sea seemed to sigh with relief as it remembered its true nature. "Impossible," the false Amphitrite gasped. "I am controlling." "You're not controlling anything," Naruto interrupted. "You're just hurting it. The ocean doesn't want to be a weapon. It wants to be life, growth, connection, and deep down, so do you." He began walking toward the corrupted goddess, each step sending ripples of healing energy through the water around them. Behind him, he could hear Kakashi shouting warnings, but he didn't stop. "Stay back," the creature snarled, raising walls of water to block his approach. But the barriers dissolved as soon as they touched him, the ocean refusing to act against someone who treated it with respect rather than dominance. "I'm not going to fight you," Naruto said, still approaching. "I'm going to remind you of something you've forgotten." "And what's that?" "That love doesn't have to hurt." He reached the corrupted Amphitrite and before she could react, pulled her into an embrace. Not a restraining hold, but a hug, the kind a son might give a stepmother who'd been alone for too long. The effect was immediate. The corruption began to crack like ice in spring sunlight, revealing glimpses of the woman underneath. And with each crack, more of the real Amphitrite showed through. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice vulnerable in a way that made Poseidon flinch with recognition. "Why would you?" "After what I did, after what I tried to do." "Because you gave me something when I needed it most," Naruto replied. "A connection to family I'd never known I had, because you're hurting and I know what that's like. And because," he glanced back at Poseidon, who was watching the scene with an expression of dawning understanding. "Because my father is an idiot who apparently never learned how to tell the people he loves that they matter to him." "Hey," Poseidon protested, but there was no real anger in it. "Am I wrong?" Naruto challenged. "When's the last time you told Amphitrite how you felt about her? When's the last time you spent time together that wasn't about business or politics or divine responsibilities?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "I thought so." Naruto turned his attention back to Amphitrite, whose corruption was continuing to fade as the real woman emerged. "Want to know a secret? He's been miserable since Zeus showed up. Kept muttering about how he'd screwed up his relationships with everyone he cared about. Apparently that includes you." "Is that true?" Amphitrite asked, looking at her husband with something like hope in her eyes. Poseidon seemed to struggle with the words for a moment before divine pride finally gave way to simple honesty. "I've been an ass. For centuries, I thought. I thought you understood that my mortal relationships didn't affect how I felt about you. I thought you knew that you were the only one who mattered in the long term. How was I supposed to know that when you never said it? Because I'm an ancient sea god with the emotional intelligence of a particularly dim starfish," Poseidon admitted. "And because I was afraid that if I told you how much I needed you, you'd realize you could do better." The last of the corruption cracked away, leaving Amphitrite looking tired but whole. The ocean around them settled into perfect calm, reflecting the sunset sky like polished glass. "Well," she said finally, "that was the most romantically inept declaration of love I've ever heard. But I suppose it will have to do." She stepped away from Naruto and walked across the water toward her husband, divine power making her movements graceful as flowing tide. When she reached Poseidon, she placed one hand against his cheek. "Next time you decide to have children with mortals," she said conversationally, "you're going to discuss it with me first. We're going to figure out how to be involved in their lives together. And if you ever make me feel forgotten again, I'm going to turn you into a sea slug for a few centuries." "Are we clear, Crystal?" Poseidon replied, then proved he was capable of learning by pulling her into a kiss that sent gentle waves radiating outward in perfect circles. "You," Naruto muttered, though he was smiling. "Divine family drama is weird. You have no idea," Oceanus called from the ship. "Wait until you meet your cousins." "I have cousins, dozens, and they're all just as dramatically emotional as their parents." As the divine couple continued their reunion, Naruto took a moment to survey the harbor town. The water was receding, leaving behind only minor flood damage instead of the devastation that had seemed inevitable minutes earlier. People were emerging from their shelters, looking around in bewilderment at the suddenly calm sea. "Not bad," Kit Kurama observed. "You stopped a divine war, saved a town, and fixed your father's marriage problems all in one afternoon. I'm impressed." "Yeah, well," Naruto replied silently, "turns out most problems are easier to solve when you try understanding instead of punching." "Most problems. Some still require punching. Good thing I'm getting better at both." Kakashi and Sakura had somehow made it to shore while Naruto was dealing with the family crisis, and he could see them organizing relief efforts with the kind of efficient professionalism that made him proud to be part of Team 7. His teammates adapting to impossible circumstances and helping people who needed it, because that's what ninja did, that's what heroes did. "Naruto," Poseidon called, swimming over with Amphitrite beside him. "We owe you a debt." "Both of us? You don't owe me anything," Naruto replied. "Your family, that's what family does, they help each other figure out how to be better." Amphitrite smiled, and this time it was the same warm expression she'd shown him weeks ago. "You know, I think I'm going to enjoy being your stepmother, properly this time. Does that mean you'll teach me more about divine politics? Because I have a feeling I'm going to need all the help I can get." "Oh, definitely. Starting with Lesson 1, never trust anything Zeus tells you without getting a second opinion." Noted. As the sun set over the now peaceful harbor, Team 7 found themselves sitting on a dock that had somehow survived the chaos, sharing a meal of fish that had literally jumped out of the ocean to offer themselves as dinner. Divine hospitality, apparently. "So," Sakura said between bites, "what happens now? We completed the mission, sort of, but I don't think stopped a corrupted goddess from destroying a coastal town is going to fit on the standard report form." "I'll handle the paperwork," Kakashi said dryly. "Though I suspect the Hokage is going to have some very interesting questions about our extended stay." "Let him ask," Naruto replied. "I'm done hiding what I am. From the village, from other gods, from anyone who thinks they get to decide how I use my power." "And how are you going to use it?" Poseidon asked, settling beside his son on the dock. Naruto looked out at the ocean, feeling the way it responded to his presence like a living thing. Then he looked at the town behind them, where people were rebuilding and helping their neighbors and generally being human in all the best ways. "I'm going to be a bridge," he said finally, "between the divine world and the mortal one, between people who are different and people who are afraid of difference, between power and responsibility." "That's not going to be easy," Amphitrite warned. "Both sides will expect you to choose them over the other. Then both sides are going to be disappointed." Naruto's voice carried the certainty of someone who had finally figured out who he was meant to be. "I'm not choosing sides. I'm creating a third option. And if that doesn't work," Kurama asked privately, "then I'll keep trying until it does," Naruto replied. "Because the alternative, a world where gods and mortals see each other as enemies, is unacceptable." As if summoned by his declaration, the ocean around them began to glow with soft blue light. Not the harsh brilliance of divine power unleashed, but something gentler, the light of hope made manifest, of possibility given form. "Well," Oceanus observed from where he was floating nearby, "that's new. And rather pretty." "It's beautiful," Sakura breathed, watching the light spread across the water like liquid starlight. Naruto stood, feeling the power flow through him without the overwhelming intensity of his earlier displays. This was different, not divine dominance or mortal determination, but something that combined both into something entirely new. "Team 7, he said, turning to his teammates with a grin that was pure Naruto despite everything that had changed, ready for the next mission. "What kind of mission?" Kakashi asked suspiciously. "The kind where we change the world." Sakura groaned, but she was smiling. I should have known. We finally get through one impossible situation and you immediately want to take on an even bigger one. Hey, if we're going to do impossible things, we might as well aim high. As they prepared to head back to Konoha, Naruto found himself thinking about everything that had brought him to this moment. The loneliness of his childhood, the confusion of awakening powers, the fear of being different, the joy of finding family he'd never known existed. All of it had led here to this dock, to this decision, to this moment when he finally understood what it meant to be the son of two worlds. He was Naruto Uzumaki, ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village. He was the son of Poseidon, inheritor of divine power. He was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, partner to one of the most powerful beings in existence. But most importantly, he was someone who had learned that strength meant protecting others, that wisdom meant knowing when not to use power, and that the best way to change the world was to start by understanding it. The ocean around them pulsed once more with gentle light, and somewhere in its depths, Naruto could swear he heard the voices of everyone who had ever been caught between two worlds, finally finding hope that they might not have to choose. It was a good beginning. Man, what a ride. From that scared kid who just wanted acknowledgement to literally mediating conflicts between gods, Naruto really found his place as the bridge between two worlds. I'm curious though, which scene got you the most hyped? The underwater throwdown with Oceanus? That family therapy session with the sea gods? Let me know in the comments. And if you're craving more impossible crossover scenarios, you know what to do. Subscribe because I've got some absolutely unhinged ideas brewing. Catch you next time.